to realize, like, no, I need to actually acknowledge, like, my accomplishments and the effort so that I can receive the reward of it, because that will increase. That'll make me more excited to work harder. And so I'm, like, learning to, like, shed that false humility.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the What You Don't Hear podcast. This is a life story podcast. It's an open journal dive into people's lives as I sit and I uncover the real story behind my guest journey, finding out what makes them who they are and all that they do, talking about all the ups, all the downs, and all the thoughts and feelings in between as we uncover the parts of their story that, well, we otherwise wouldn't get to hear. Now, I am your host. My name is Ross Tyson. I'm a creative of many kinds. You know how this goes. I'm a maker of many things, and as you probably guessed, one of those things I do is podcasting, as I bring you a couple different shows at this point, but this one right here in particular, I bring you every other Monday, as well as sporadically on Fridays for the topic-based 15-minute Fridays. And honestly, here's a quick reminder that if you do want something else to check out, you want another podcast to go listen to, well, I've got some options for you, because first I do an improv comedy podcast as well. It's called Whose Life Is It Anyway? It's kind of like this show, but imagine if the guest's life story that we were talking about was, well, completely made up, and there's improv games introduced, and there's a lot of messy chaos all around the story. It's wacky, it's weird, it's crazy, and I hope that at least you think it's funny. So go check it out. That's at Whose Life Pod. Or, of course, wherever you're listening to this show at, just go look up Whose Life Is It Anyway. That's where you'll find it. And I've also got my newest show. It's called Honestly Same, where myself and two of my very best friends and co-hosts, Leah and Brittany, we sit down to talk all things life. We discuss the good, the bad, the ugly, and all of our experiences around it. So yeah, I want you to like those shows too, because options, folks, I have options for your entertainment, and it's probably not slowing down anytime soon, so I would love if you went and checked any of those out. I appreciate your support with any of them that you do go and listen to, just like this one right here. And speaking of support, I'm going to tell you about a few supporters of this show directly. We're going to pay some bills, and then we're going to dig into this week's episode with my wonderful guest, Gabrielle Solange, as she shares a very wild and honestly just super interesting story. So up first, it's something I've been telling you for months now. If you're looking for a place to live and you want to live in the middle of the art-filled lifestyle over in Franklinton, then what you don't hear is your hookup, because we are sponsored by our friends over at River and Rich. Now, River and Rich brings together quality apartments, desirable amenities, and a vibrant artistic community. Located right in Franklinton, River and Rich offers 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and townhouse-style apartments with open floor plans, oversized windows, and modern finishes. The amenities, those include a huge 24/7 gym, a heated pool, a fully stocked coffee bar, and a secure package delivery room. Pretty much everything you need for a cool place to live. And it doesn't just stop at the building. River and Rich embraces and connects with the art-filled Franklinton community. They've got local art and murals featured all throughout the community itself. River and Rich is both a place to go home to and is also becoming a living piece of art in its own. So if that environment sounds like something that you want to live in, well, of course you can. Go check it out. They offer both guided and self-guided tours, so you can go check out an apartment anytime. Visit their website at riverandrichcolumbus.com for more information. Also, check this out. Because you listen to this podcast, I might be able to help you get a freaking apartment, because now new applicants can receive up to half off their security deposit if you use the code WYDH pod. So again, for more information, please contact River and Rich. Certain restrictions might apply. Hop over to riverandrichcolumbus.com to get things moving and go join the colorful life over at River and Rich. We are also sponsored by our longtime supporters over at Promo West Productions, and this is how I support them back, because talking about Columbus's music scene is one thing, but we all know that experiencing it is entirely another. So if you're interested in catching a live show, maybe you'll want to check out one of these upcoming concerts brought to you by Promo West. They've got Dark Star Orchestra at Kemba Live on November 19th, Beach Fossils at Newport Music Hall on November 16th. Doobie comes to Kemba Live on Friday, November 24th. and then Division at Kemba Live on November 26th. So if you want to grab tickets to any of those shows, you can by jumping to axs.com. Or, as always, for more information on these or any other upcoming concerts, if you want to find out who's coming to Columbus and when, you can find all that information you need over at promowestlive.com. We are also supported by our friends over at Ingram Audio. So, musicians, producers, music makers of any kind, this next part is for you. Ingram Audio wants you to spend less time mixing your music and just more time creating it. Because Ingram Audio's goal is to create unique, user-friendly plugins for musicians and creatives of any skill level to make sure your process is just more simple and streamlined. It doesn't matter if you're a professional or a hobbyist just trying to write your next jam, Ingram Audio creates products to make the creative process run smoothly so that writing can be more fun and less stressful. They've got drum libraries, mix and master templates, and MIDI loop packs. They've got you covered in a handful of different ways that are all ready for you to plug and play at any time. So if you want more info on any of their products, if you want to check it all out for yourself, well, hop over to ingramaudio.co for all the information and purchase options that you need, or you can follow them at Ingram Audio Co. That's Ingram Audio Co. All right, y'all, so let's get to it. This week's episode is a wonderful chat with the multi-talented Gabrielle Solange. And while I knew Gabby was someone with many talents and many different avenues that she's created in life, I don't think that I was truly prepared for the story that she shared in this conversation, to be honest. It is a winding tale of chasing dreams, catching them, achieving a level of stardom, losing it, learning herself, learning her real self-worth, honestly, picking herself back up, and just so much more. She's a musician, a songwriter, a public speaker, and simply a person with a ton of heart and passion behind all the things that she has ventured into. And of course, we dive into all of those things right here in this episode. So let's do that now. Toss in your headphones, turn the volume up, close those curtains, start your car, whatever you got to do to get yourself ready for a brand new life story to be tossed your way, because it is time to get to know somebody a lot better. This is episode 96 of What You Don't Hear, and my conversation with Gabrielle Solange.
Oh gosh, what are we going to talk about? I don't even know what we're going to talk about. You're going to make me cry, I know it.
I mean, maybe not. I don't know. You are more than welcome to, if you want to, of course. Mm-hmm. This is absolutely a space in which you can do that. It has happened before. I will also say I have cried on my own show, if that helps you. So don't feel weird.
You're like staring at me too, somebody crying and you're looking at me. Oh my gosh. Oh God.
if that happens, I could if it just helps, I can just look any other direction. It is just as much your show as it is mine.
All right.
So on that note, are you ready to make a podcast?
Yes. Let's
make it happen. I am so very stoked that we are actually finally sitting down after some time of trying to align schedules and make this work. I am so happy to be doing this. And I'm very excited to get to know you because you do so many cool things. And I try to be a person who does so many cool things. So whenever I can sit down with somebody else who ventures and webs themselves out into so many different creative directions, it's always exciting to see, how you balance that and where it all got started and everything. But with this being the very first time we're ever sitting down, I would love to hear from you. What all do you do? Because maybe there's things that I also don't know. Because I know you make music. I know you're a writer. I know you did a TED Talk, right? Is that correct? TEDx. And that already is a dope list of things to have done.
But
what all are you involved in?
Ooh, good question. I'm supposed to talk about myself. All right.
Yes. This is the place to do it, 100%.
I just kind of, I feel like I've just been in a shift lately, so I'm kind of transitioning back into my music. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I guess it's funny because I didn't choose to do a bunch of things. I just felt like I had no choice.
Okay.
Because, I couldn't get a whole team to do my dreams. I had to figure out how to do each thing. Mm-hmm. And then I wanted to support myself. in order to do it. So I just figured out how to do it well enough to make money, and it ended up becoming a company or a hustle, and that's just kind of what happened. But I guess right now I'm a vocal coach. So I love actually vocal coaching. I just was the official vocal coach for the Music Columbus Incubator program. So they sent me 10 artists, and I'm in the process of putting out like their journey on the Run Song page on Instagram. It's really fun. It's been really, really cool to get to know like the next generation. I feel like they're the next generation. I guess they're like a little younger than me, but of musicians, and it just feels awesome to pour into them and be able to support myself through it. Whenever I can support myself through what I love, it feels really cool. So I'm a vocal coach, and I also do so many things. Gosh, I am obviously a singer and a songwriter, which is what I'm going back to focusing on. So I just put out a new single, and I love it, and it's getting like it has an audience now, and I'm just spend a lot of hours pushing it and submitting it to blogs and playlists and all that, like all the time.
Right.
I work in social media, so I do the social media for different companies, for different individuals, influencers, and artists. I was doing that a lot, and now I'm switching back into music. What else? I write for an indie music magazine. So I pick a couple artists every month and tell their story, because so in 2021, I had this horrible thing happen where I had like a neck injury, and I couldn't really sing anymore. And that was a very hard time. And I had to shift gears and figure out what I'm going to do while I was freaking out about my voice, while I was in tons of pain, unable to lay down for months. And so like I was completely making a living off my voice, and then suddenly it was like, what am I going to do? And I didn't want to like go back to working a regular job and throw everything away. So that's how I got into doing social media for other people. And through that, I just learned so much, because there's one thing to build for yourself. It's another thing when you have other people's money and you get to build for them and you have more freedom. So it was really, really cool working on teams behind artists, and even working for companies. I worked for like a company out in Las Vegas that does acting and places people in like HBO films and stuff. And so I just learned so much. And during that time, I focused more on helping other people do their dreams, because I had to figure out a way to keep myself like in that vein. And it was also my way of like rebelling against hopelessness. It was like, well, if I can't sing, then I'll help amplify other artists. So I started writing more for other artists, and that became very therapeutic for me.
Yeah. Okay. So there's so many different things that I want to ask you within that. One of the things you said at the beginning of that was you didn't necessarily plan to do a bunch of stuff,
no,
right? It's sort of like you sort of fell into it by probably just chasing after like, oh, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that.
Yeah.
What even spawns that? Like, what do you feel like is like the first step in that entire journey? Because I feel like most often, most of us are either told or guided or assume that it's like, oh, we're supposed to pick a thing, get good at a thing, and then we do that thing. Whether we end up hating it or not, we just keep doing it. And maybe we're creative on the side if we have time.
That's true.
Like, how does that start for you? Like, what begins the domino effect for you?
Well, first of all, let me thank you and commend you for directing me, because I would have just went on forever.
No,
I literally had like I was like, oh God, I don't know where to go. So thank you. I feel like you're like a GPS in the conversation.
Hey, you know what? I'll accept that.
No, but honestly, it's a funny question, because like picking something and sticking to it, I actually felt a lot of pressure to do that. And it was really hard to choose to go after my dream. What do you know about me?
So that is a great question.
Because I don't know where to go.
This is, I would say, all just general surface level things. That's all I know. So something that I do like on this show very like purposely is like when I have a guest on that I don't already know, I don't do like a detective deep dive into them, right?
Okay, good to know.
Yes, literally everything you want to share, I'm learning everything for the very first time. Again, I know the stuff you post about, the stuff that's listed on your Instagram, right?
Okay.
Other than that, take me wherever you want to go.
Okay, so I guess I could just say, like, because, like, I have this, I think my background is one of the things that drive me, and then my faith. And so I would say, like, when I was a kid, I feel like this is so vulnerable. When I was a kid, it was like around 6 or 7, I just really had, I felt really guided, like I would be a singer, and I didn't really make sense at the time. I didn't like have any like people around me telling me anything about like careers or destinies or anything that would make sense in my little girl mind. But I remember looking in the mirror and seeing crowds and just hearing my name announced, and like that's just what I remember feeling and seeing. And I would just write songs and record them and on my cassette player. And so when I got so my life though became really dark, and I ended up in foster care after running away from an abusive home. And so I lived in different cities and through foster care, and I just had a really hard time. And music became my sanctuary. Music just became my hiding place and the only place I knew to go. So set aside any dreams or anything like that. I just felt like I'm doing this to survive at this point. And that's pretty much what it was for me around like 14 years old. And I was a pretty suicidal kid. I just didn't want to be around. Am I allowed to say that? It's like, am I allowed to talk about something?
You can talk about whatever you want to talk about, 100%.
Yeah, so I was just a very sad, it's like I had so much joy, and then it was like finally I snapped. And I just, that's one of the reasons I work with youth today. That's why I love working with youth, because I just am one of them still, and I love to get in that space with them. But I just was a very troubled child. I didn't feel like anyone wanted me or that I belonged. And so I would just hide in my music, and people would find out, like students would find out, and they'd be like, what are you doing? Why do you bring your notebook to the cafeteria? You think you're going to make it as a musician or something? And I was like, huh? I can make it as a musician? I forgot. Wait, I didn't think about that. And I started thinking, like, that would be cool. Wait, that's impossible. I'm poor. I have no parents, and I'm pretty sure you need a record label for that. And so I just started thinking that. But one day, I was just I was a really sad person, and I say that just to kind of, this is such a weird thing to just like blur out. I feel like my life is super weird, but I find that when people ask me questions, unless I'm going to like make up an answer, there's like no way to like answer it without being weird. So it just is what it is. But anyways, so I had a counselor assigned to me by the government, or the state or whatever. And she asked me a question, and I love her because she was like the only counselor I would talk to. But she was like, Gabrielle, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, oh, it's impossible. She's like, no, nothing's impossible. Just tell me. And I was like, well, I want to be like a famous singer, and then I want to come back and help like, girls the way you help girls. And she was like, Gabrielle, it's absolutely possible. And I was like, who does she think she is? Just telling me things are possible. You can't just say that. It's clearly just, whatever. You know, if I knew the term privilege back then, I probably would have thought that. But I just thought, like, you don't know. But it stuck in my head. And that night, every night, I know this sounds like so, like, morbid, but I would literally, like, pray that God would kill me. I was just like, God, please, can I just like, I just want to be here, please. And I would write letters to God that said sorry for nothing, as if I just felt like, sorry for existing. Sorry. And the reason why I say that is because I remember that night I prayed a different prayer. I was like, can I be a singer instead? Like, I know what I would want to do if I have to live here.
Yeah.
And I say that to say that, a few weeks later, I don't know if it was weeks or months, and I honestly, it's funny because I forgot that I had that moment, but I remembered it way later, is I ended up in an inner city program, and that person who runs the program now actually runs a new program of her own, but at the time she was a mentor there. She's awesome, by the way. Jackie Calderon. And I was I was making music there because a kid had found me, and I was like this emo kid, and she was like, "You're really good. You should learn to do stuff on the studio mic and learn to layer your voice." And I had it was like next level. Like it like brought a nostalgia of like, oh my gosh, it's like when I was 7, but I can do like multiple layers and do anything I want and sound like the radio. And I would go there when no one else was there because I didn't want to be around people. And so she had the key, so she would let me in secretly when everyone was, she was the intern, which is totally not right, but she was like, I got you. And we would like, literally, I would sleep overnight there on the sound foam because nobody cared where I was. And I would make music, and I got involved with a few other kids that I actually got along with, who I didn't like hate, who weren't trying to like, you know, I was super traumatized as a teenager by the world. Mm-hmm. I grew up very sheltered. And so going into foster care and being introduced to like drugs and sex and like everything that I was sheltered from was super traumatizing to me. I was like, I didn't know that boys, I was just very traumatized when I realized like boys didn't see me the same as they did back home, you know. So I didn't want to be around them. And so basically I did that, and I ended up making some songs. Long story short, I know this seems like a long story, but I hope you cut all this out. I hope you cut it out.
Here's the honest truth. A lot of the times, unless somebody really, really wants something directly cut out, I don't do a lot of editing.
Okay.
But I also say that because this is the place for these stories. 100%.
Okay.
That is literally what the show is designed for. So I promise, don't feel like you have to like water yourself down.
Okay.
Of like, oh my God, I'm talking about me too much. Like, this is about you.
Okay. Okay. I'll keep going then. So I ended up making a song with some kids, and the mentor, Jackie Calderon, she would enter me into camps, get me scholarships, get me into shows. She's expanded my horizons. Like she did, like she changed my life by just like believing in me, putting paint in my hands and giving me opportunities. And one of the things is they got us on this, me and some kids on this touring bus that was called the John Lennon Songwriting Tour Bus. And it was like a charity give back from Yoko Ono. And we ended up making a song, and the manager of that bus was like, "You guys are like totally good. We like go around the whole country, and I promise you, we have never met a group like you." And we're like, "You say that to everybody." But long story short, he passed it to his manager, which happened to be the manager of Lauryn Hill, or Lauryn Hill and the Black Eyed Peas and all these people. And I ended up at 15 years old getting signed to Sony Records.
That is wild. Okay.
And so then I got on my first plane. We ended up having a reality show about our lives on BET. We ended up walking red carpets. I toured. That was when Chris Brown was still just coming out. So we toured with him. And he was actually like a really cool buddy of mine. But then my boyfriend got jealous, and I stopped talking to him. Real talk. That's a whole other story. But I just had this amazing life, and I was living my dream. But there's just a lot. But for the most part, I want to like say this without talking forever. I was pretty empty still, even though I was living my dream. And that's when I realized like something's off, something's missing. I don't understand. I'm living my dream. I'm literally Cinderella. I'm like a poor orphan walking a red carpet. And that's when I remembered something my art teacher told me. And I know that it's totally politically incorrect to like talk about spiritual things in a school if you're a teacher, but he was like, "You need Jesus." Like he always said stuff like that to kids. And I was just like, whatever. And like I think one time I was like, well, I kind of have Jesus already, but it doesn't do anything, you know. But it's like in that moment I remembered everything he said, and I was so desperate to know like what the heck. And so it was like I remember the moment I finally like my heart had this surrender moment, and I was like, I just want to be closer to God. And after that, everything changed. Out of nowhere, everything changed. Like everything started lining up, and it was weird. And like every person who came in my life after that suddenly had this like awesome relationship with God, but they weren't religious either, which like I didn't want to be like the Christians I knew. They were like, I mean, I'm not trying to say anything negative, but you said I can say whatever. Yeah, so yeah, I only knew, I did love God, and I did like believe in God, but I also knew a lot of hypocritical Christians or who were racist or just whatever. But all of a sudden after that moment, that's when I started meeting people who just like knew who they were. They were not judgy, they weren't perfect, but they just had this like awesome relationship with God. Like my choreographer, my substitute teacher, and then a new member of our band joined, and he was like all about God. And so basically from there, everything changed for me, and I got I feel like I started the foundation of where I am now. It was quite a journey, but from there, things were good for a while, and then all of a sudden we had this like strange thing started happening with like politics in the industry with labels. And back then, YouTube wasn't really like what it is now, and everything had to go through labels. There wasn't a bunch of contests and indie artists and people deciding that they don't have to stick to a genre. And we were like that. We were like, well, what are they? And I remember there was this thing of like, well, where do we put them? Like, are they R&B? Well, if we're going to be R&B, if you're going to put them on BET, we need to like make them more urban. And I remember they bought in like a black guy to pose as our manager for the reality show, even though our manager was actually a Jewish guy, and it was just all so fake. And I remember them like trying to make us sing these songs about like being in the club, and I was like, I've never been to a club, and I just felt like, why won't you let me do what I want? And I remember the people on the inside, like our choreographer and the people who like also work with celebrities and had seen all this before, they're like, you guys need to do your music that you want to do. And I was like, I don't know, they don't want us to. And so things started to like go different ways, and it was really hard. And I think that there was also something going on at the label, because we were signed to a department called Sony Urban, and they don't exist anymore. So it just so happens that at the same time we were signed to them, there was a bunch of issues going on, and everything was just falling apart, and we didn't know where to go. So the label dropped us before falling apart, and then our manager tried to shop us to other labels like Hollywood Records and everything, and he would have these meetings and he'd be like, so they love your song, and then they found out it was you guys, and they said, there's just too many things going on there, they're too different, you've got different ages, different races, they don't really stick to a genre, that's not marketable. And we heard that over and over and over again until we were told, you know what, we're gonna have to send you guys home, we'll give you a call. And then of course we just never got the call. So it was just over just like that. No one knew what happened. The internet was full of what happened to that group. And I had a few more opportunities after that, but to be honest, I felt so lost as a kid. I felt so lost. And by then I was like 18, and I remember the last thing that I did was I was 19, and I wrote one last song, and it was called Survive, and it was just me letting everything go and saying, I got to find a way to move forward in my life. And actually, when I got home to Columbus, I did not have a good time. So people weren't nice to me at all. And to be honest, it's like a mixture still. It's like really weird. I didn't actually do anything. They're strangers or people who shouldn't have anything against me, but like people would be like, I had to take the bus because I didn't know how to drive, because I didn't have parents and no one taught me when I was in Hollywood because people were driving me. So I came home and had to take the bus after being famous. So people were like, yo, oh my gosh, it's that girl. Yo, man, she ain't no star. What is she doing here? And I would try to order. I will never forget these memories. I remember ordering a steak sandwich, and the girl was like, why are you here? Did you fail? And I just remember just having to bite my lip and answer questions, and I would just freeze and shake. And I remember I wrote one last song, I say last, but it was like I just have to bleed out a song real quick and then just say goodbye to music. I don't want to remember any of this. I just want to move on with my life. And a producer, he actually, at the time, he believed in me a lot. His name is Toby Gadd, and he actually wrote All of Me with John Legend and a bunch of really famous songs. And at the time, he was like, Gabrielle, you're so talented. You can write for other artists. So you come on, sing your song. You have a song to sing? Come on, record it. I will make the music. And I was like, I don't even have money to get to New York. And he was like, I'll buy your ticket. It's really cheap. So he flew me out there. I stayed in one of his studios in New York, and we made the song. And in that moment, it was like, okay, this sounds good. I'm being myself. It's so awesome. And then so there was a moment, I guess this is like the defining moment of why I walked away from music. So there were like these other singers that were traveling from Switzerland, and he asked me to help them write a song. So I did. He asked me to help him demo it. I did. And then I took a nap on the couch. And while they were all together, he was like, if you team up with Gabby, you could probably go far because she's really talented. And it's hard in this industry. She's fresh out of a group and people know who she is. And they're like, she is talented, but she's not famous enough anymore. Can you get us Kanye? And I was just like, I heard them because I had woken up and I just felt so awkward. And I just pretended to be asleep for like 5 more minutes and then woke up. And then that was one of those moments where like, I guess I was just, I guess now, once again, I know the word triggered. So back then, I guess I didn't, but I just had this flashback of like, I don't belong anywhere. Like I just felt thrown away. And I remember I went to the top of the building in New York, and I looked down, and all those old feelings came back, and I was just like, I don't want to do this. Why'd you bring me here? Why'd you bring me this far and give me my dreams if I could get thrown away just because I'm not famous? It's like talent doesn't matter. Like this world is so fake, and I don't want to be here. But I just had such a strong record now of like God showing me who he was that I just felt like I can't think this way anymore. I can't do this. Maybe people don't see my worth, but I know God does. So I went back downstairs and I didn't tell anybody. I just decided I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going home. And I tried a few more things, but they asked the publishing company, and it came in and they were like, oh, we could sell this song. We like this. And they're like, we're thinking Rihanna. And I was like, what are you trying to say? You're really trying to say I can't sing this myself? No, you can't have it. I'm going home. And Toby was like, you don't want to sell it? And I was like, no, this is mine. It's my music. And I realized like later on, it hit me. I was like, what was I thinking? I went home to be a waitress and a security guard. I could have just like sold it for a few $1,000s and stayed in New York and not been like homeless, like in poverty. But in my heart, I felt like those were the things that came out of me that I needed to sing myself. And I went home, and I remember I put it out for free. And a few weeks later, I got a call and a bunch of emails from my old manager while I was working security. I think it was in Lewin Center, Ohio. I was working security part-time and then being a waitress at B-Dubs. And people knew me there too, and they would make fun of me, like, "Oh, that's that girl." Da, 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 da. And it was terrible. It was like, I swear there should be like a movie about my life, but it was like the worst. And basically, Toby was like, look, and he emailed me all these videos. And at the same time, I got a call. So I took a call while I was at work, and I was like, "What's going on?" And it was the publishing company, and they were like, how did you do that? And I was like, do what? And they're like, how'd you get millions of views on your song? And I was like, huh? And apparently someone had taken it and put it on YouTube, and a bunch of people from all over Europe and China, like Asia and the UK, made anime videos. Even there's this Asian girl who like lip synced to the song and made her own version, and people were making remixes of it. And I was like, huh? Oh, wow. Finally, they're gonna see. They should have let me just be myself all along. Finally. And I was just waiting. This was gonna be the moment that they were like, you know what? Let's let her do her thing. And Toby believed that they should do that. And so then they said, I was just waiting for it. And all they said was, so you're technically still signed to us, and we could sue you. So take that down, and we need to be able to put it up ourselves so we can take our 20%. And I think I lost all of the last hope I had. And in my mind, I just thought, just give up already. What were you thinking? You can't make it. You have no label. You have no parents. You have no money. And that was your last shot. So, and that was the last song I did for like over a decade. So now that you know that crazy backstory.
Yes.
For a whole decade, I tried working a lot of different jobs. And at one point I worked 4 jobs, and I literally forgot which job to go to, and I got fired because I ran. It was like 2 of them were in Easton, and I was like, one shift was over, and I ran to the next one. It was like, oh, not the right one. I was obsessed with work. So now you see why I do so many things.
Hey, wow. Gabrielle, that might be the most interesting first 20 minutes of this show that I have ever had. What an incredible story. That is wild. that is also so much to experience until, I mean, so what age were you when like that last thing happened?
I was 19.
That is
Yeah.
a lot. That is a lot to experience.
Yeah.
Like, because even when I started doing any sort of work in the music industry for a while, when I did, I literally spent a decade in it and learning it and doing all this sort of stuff. And then finally I was like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. So it took me
Wow.
a decade of experiencing it. And, you know, obviously from my side of the side that I was on and everything, but that is literally so much to experience, especially not only at that young of age in that time frame, but also, like you said, you went from having not experienced, quote unquote, like a lot of life to then kind of having this like shock value of like, oh wait, this is kind of how people are, and this is what this is, and that's what that is. But then going into something that also a lot of people just dream about and think about, of like gaining any sort of momentum in a creative or entertainment field. The fact that you then get on that train and it's just like going 100 miles an hour, that is a lot. Like, so let me ask you this. How do you feel like experiencing all of that so quickly? How do you feel like that's like shaped who you are now? Like, are you still a person who, like, do you want to be going 100 miles an hour with all things at all times? Or are you like, I've experienced different versions of it and it could be so start and stop that I'd rather just kind of coast consistently and be happy while I do. Like, where do you feel like you sit at now when it comes to a lot of, and it doesn't necessarily have to be music, but maybe just creative endeavors or just life in general? Like, do you feel like you're still looking for that, like, I want to be going 100 miles an hour again? Or
Well, I would say it feels like I'm going 100 miles an hour now, but it's just because there's a big difference from doing everything yourself and then having a whole team where you just wake up and there's a hairdresser with like some $1,500 weave to sew into your head and a budget and makeup and food always waiting for you in the room. Like, I've definitely feel like this is harder for sure. Doing things for yourself. I think how it shaped me is it made me not want to do it. But that was just because of the mindset I was in. It was a mindset of trauma. And not just trauma from the industry and hearing those things. Like, there's a lot I can't like say right now. Like, there was time, like there's a whole thing where, like this thing I'm wearing right now, Confidentity, this is my brand. And it's like kind of in the beginning stages, but it was born out of a moment, like a lot of moments where I had to really decide to know my self-worth. And it, like, I remember going to like a party for our album release and I looked amazing. And I remember the manager was like, "Oh, your hair looks good." And I was like, "Just my hair? Like, what is he talking about?" And he was like, "If I were coming to a party like where I was like the whole star, I would have definitely fasted for 3 days." And I just remember like those things. So I would just say I had a lot of trauma when I tried to write a song. Like, for years, I tried to write songs for myself just to heal myself, just to feel like myself again. And I couldn't. I really thought I was dead. Like, I thought I was broken forever. And so I would say like that experience kind of broke me, and it made me feel like nothing was good enough. It made me feel like, what's the point? And I hated that. I hated that it broke me. And I was so desperate to just for once, just write. I didn't even feel like, this sounds crazy, but I didn't even feel like my own thoughts in my journal were good enough. Like, I really just was the lowest. Like, I had nothing. And so now I think I just went on a journey, and it definitely was just a journey of like, and it is like one, I guess it's, how much time do we have?
as much time as we need.
Okay, so I wasn't planning on ever doing music again because that, like, how it shaped me is it made me not want to do it. And when I would just pray and be like, "Can you please restore my songwriting gifts so you can fix me, whatever." But I would literally lay on the floor and try to write like how I used to when I was a kid, and I would feel like my brain was broken. I would feel like physical pain, as if my body, it sounds crazy, but I would literally feel like my body was rejecting this thing that could hurt me, which was songwriting. Like, this is not going to be good enough. It's going to hurt you. You're going to get rejected. Don't do it. And that, I didn't know what to do. So what happened was I ended up, it's just more crazy, I have no other way to tell my story. So what happened is I got an injury. So now you've heard of 2 injuries. I had my neck injury in 2021, but this is actually before, like, this was way, like, 7 years. So it was 7 years before 2016. I'm trying to do math. 2009.
I'm bad at math, so you could have been like 1967. I would have been like, absolutely.
So I had this injury. I like fell, and I ended up messing up my ankle, but it ended up traveling up the left side of my body and messing me up, so I couldn't walk, like, without tons of pain. And I ended up going to like a ton of different doctors. So this is like a side story. It's very random. It seems unrelated, but it's actually the reason why I started singing. So what happened is, like, I just became kind of like I was slowly becoming disabled. And that was like a panic point in my life, because I was like, oh my gosh, like, all I do is work. That's how I keep myself busy. That's how I push down anxiety. That's how I give myself a security. Because remember, I don't have any safety net. And suddenly I can't even walk without pain. And I was just like, what am I going to do? And I ended up having to, like, move back in a place that was abusive. And during that time, I just don't know how to tell my story to, like, normal people, because it feels like I'm making it up. This is genuinely my story. So you're about to go to church. So what happened was, I remember laying in bed and feeling like my life was over. It's all my fault. I ruined everything. God gave me my dream and I blew it. Now what? It's all my fault. If only I would have known what to do with my viral song. I could have easily hopped on YouTube and been like, hey, you guys, that's my song. And started like, what was I thinking? It's all my fault. Like, I just went down everything I've ever done, like a failure. And I was like, now this is what I deserve. Like, I don't even deserve to walk. Like, I'm the most depressed. I need, like, some of that, like, scattered joy.
Yeah, of course.
But I had a moment where it was like a God moment. And basically I was like, God, is healing, like, are miracles real? Because I did believe in them at one point, but I look around at the world and my family, they're full of people who are disabled. My sisters are sick. My aunt's disabled. Like, everyone's sick and disabled. And I just remember I prayed and asked God if it was real, and that if it wasn't going to happen for me, then help me to accept how I am now, so I don't have to wish that I could walk again, wish that I could have a different life, and that maybe I need this because I failed at everything. I know that sounds sad, but I just didn't know what to think. And that's kind of a lot of times, like, some religious views. It's like, oh, the pain is to make you better. So I just trying to be humble, I guess. But what happened after that is, after that, an old friend from school, happens to be the son of that teacher who was like, you need Jesus. He reached out to me and he's like, hey, I've been thinking about you. Do you want to, like, can you come over? And I was like, I guess. I don't even think we're friends anymore, but sure, whatever. And I just went over there and he showed me, like, a documentary about a guy who didn't believe in miracles, who had a family member who claimed they had a miracle. And now he was going around the world to like investigate if miracles were real. I was like, this is interesting. And at the end of the documentary, I was like, are these people crazy fanatics? Like my friend and them, I was like, are they like wackos? I don't want to be like them. And then I was like, but I really want this to be real. What is this, such a coincidence? And so I went home thinking, like, what was that? So random. The next day I went to the library, and this man who I didn't really know him, but he would always say, hey, sis. He would always say hi, say something nice to me. So I get on the computer, and he sat next to me. And he pulled up the website for that documentary. And he said, sis, this is for you. And I was like, what's happening? So I go home, and I'm just obsessed now. I'm like, I'm not meant to be like this for the rest of my life. And that was the beginning of a 7-year journey of me trying to figure out, like, how can I be healed? I know that sounds so crazy, but I couldn't walk before. I couldn't wear these Converses. I had to wear, like, I had arches in my shoes. I could walk for about 10 minutes without my whole spine burning for 7 years. And basically what happened is I just got to this point where I decided, well, I'm going to try going to church again. Maybe I'll just go to the church of the guy who reached out. So I went to his church, and this Jewish lady got up on stage and told this amazing story about how she had this skin condition and a lump in her neck, and how she, long story short, God healed her. And she was like, she called Jesus Yeshua because she's Jewish. But she was just like, yeah, Yeshua is the Messiah, blah, 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 heal me, whatever. And I was like, oh, I want to judge her and like say that this is ridiculous, but something in me won't let me because I need it to be true. Long story short, 2016. So I went through just learning. I don't want to say everything, but I just went through a lot of ups and downs with trying to understand like the love of God. And I learned that I didn't feel worthy of love. I learned that I did not feel worthy, and that even if God wanted to heal me, I know it sounds weird, but I felt like even if he wanted to, he couldn't, because there's something in me blocking. And that hurt me. It hurt me more than knowing that I couldn't walk, is I couldn't receive love. And so I just became obsessed with learning to be loved. And I thought, if this somehow broken leg thing is a manifestation of how broken I am on the inside, then that's what I should care about. Because I realized my whole life I didn't feel worthy, and all of my missed opportunities are from me not feeling worthy. So God, if you can heal that, that's what I would like. That's what I started praying for. And along that, I still went to school. I still did stuff, I just like hobbled along and stuff. And and I went to college. I went to Columbus State. I took an African American history class. I was on a journey of heritage too. Like if you got to see my Tedx talk, it's about accepting my skin, and that's a whole nother part of my life, which I grew up in like a super racist town. And I never wanted to be, that was a whole thing I needed to overcome. And so during that class, I loved that class. And I was able to tie that class and Black heritage to my experience with faith. So it was really healing for my identity. And then he said, hey, I feel like every Black person should go to Africa once in their life. And really I was like, you know what? I think I would love to do that one day, one day when I can walk. And all of a sudden, the next year, this guy, they were going to do a mission trip for this orphanage, and all these things going on in Uganda, because a friend of the church's had lived there. He was born there, and he had an organization called Hope in the Land where they serve orphans and do all these things. And he was also a musician that used to tour when he was younger, and we were friends. And he was like, Gabby, you should come on this trip. And I was like, I'm not coming to Africa like this. And he was like, no, I feel like you're supposed to come. And I was like, ugh. And he was like, come on, you can help the kids and you can do music again. I know you want to do music again. And I was like, I do. I mean, it would be nice if I do it across the world and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have to feel pressure. I mean, I'm tired of this leg thing holding me back. So I raised the money. At the time I had a job teaching those paint and wine shows. So because I can paint and stuff too. So that's another thing I do, I guess. So then I went to Africa, out of nowhere, because I was obsessed with just trying to find my purpose and my healing or my miracle, or just to feel like myself again. And I just remembered my teacher told me to go to Africa, so I'm gonna do it. And while I was there, I had some crazy stuff happen that I won't get into on this podcast. It's the kind of stuff you see in movies. I saw a lot of stuff, and it really opened me and woke me up to more of the reality of things that we can't see. And there was a moment where I just realized I had a moment with the orphans by myself, and I remember just having another God moment, and it went something like this: God, how do you see these orphans? I see them just like I see you. I'm not like them. Oh shoot, why did I just say that? Oh no, I'm a terrible person. What's wrong? It was wait, why did I, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It was gross. Why did I think that? And then it was And then suddenly my heart was exposed, and I realized there's something about the orphans that I don't want to relate to. And I felt like I was all the other people in my life that had maybe looked down on me for being poor or Black or whatever. And so I was like, that can't be possible. I'm not I can't think that, right? It makes no sense. But in that moment, I felt like God showed me in my heart, and it was no condemnation. It was just like, let down your wall. And I was like, no, please, please, please. I don't want to let down my wall, because if I let down my wall, I'll feel their pain. And then I heard, I know, I do it all the time. And then I realized, like, that is literally the whole story of the gospel, is like God coming into our world, feeling our pain, taking it all, being like us. And I just realized, like, I finally understood love. I finally understood being loved. And I just broke, and it felt like a waterfall, like it just felt like a dam opened. And I remember I remember just feeling like, oh my God, I feel so good to admit I'm actually more like these orphans than I am all the people I came with. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one who had to really raise money to be here, and I did not fit in with them, and I wanted to fit in with them so bad. I was trying to prove myself to them so bad. And it finally just felt good to let down my wall and be with them and see them as me, and to feel God's love with them, and not think that I'm some minister helping them, I'm higher on some bullshit. So are we allowed to cuss on this?
Yes.
Just talk about Jesus and said shit. But seriously, that was my moment. That's my authentic moment. And after that, I wrote a really cool song for them, and I performed it. What happened was, it was actually super cool. It was like a Disney movie. So I started writing a song because I felt like God had showed me more about how he sees them. So I started writing a declaration for their lives, for them, because there's a lot of richness in the land, but there's an overwhelming despair, and because of the corruption in government, and just because of some of the other stuff, a lot of people come in and give them handouts, but they kind of don't feel empowered to do things on their own. And it just creates this dynamic. And I knew that we came there to empower them and tell them that they are powerful, and working with the Ugandans alongside them. And so I wrote a song that was a declaration song, I am rich, I am strong. And I remember I would say it, and I was just testing it out because I was going to sing it that night on the stage. And I was like, I am rich. And they were like, I am rich. And I was like, what? I am strong. They're like, I am strong. And I was like, ugh. And they're like, ah. And I was like, oh my God, you got to come on stage with me. It's going to be so good. We're going to throw a whole thing together. And so then it was time to perform. And I remember saying I need to get the orphans, the kids, to actually come on the stage. And they're like, are you kidding me? Do you see this crowd? We can't arrange that. And I was like, dang it, they just don't listen to me. Nobody listens to me. Ah. And then I just felt like God was like, shh, calm down and stop being like that. So it was just okay, I need to learn to stop being a little brat and stop trying to prove everything to everybody. So I ended up just getting up there by myself and being like, okay, I can do this by myself. And I started to sing the song. And then as soon as I started singing it, I don't know how, it was thousands of people, but all the kids heard the song, and they parted the crowd and climbed on stage and joined me. And I looked around, I was like, and my team was in the back, how did you do that? And I just looked up at the sky, and I was like, ah! And I just was like, this is everything. And then I just remember looking back at my team. There was a specific member, I felt like I had to prove myself to them. And I remember them looking at me and being like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. And I remember feeling like I was waiting for that moment for them to finally see how cool I was. And it wasn't satisfying at all. And I realized that's not as satisfying as I thought it would be. I realized that was, I don't need that. And I'm so happy I have these kids, and I'm in Africa. And I remember deciding that I'm going to dance, even though I'm going to be in so much pain, because when else will I get to dance in Africa? And I remember I saw people saying they were healed when they were prayed for. Even when I prayed for them, they would be like, oh, my pain's gone. I'm like, really? Because my pain's still here, but okay, I'm just going to be happy for you. And I was like, God, are you really going to let me see all these miracles and send me home without one? Seriously, God, I don't want to be mad at you, and I don't want to be mad at myself. And then I finally was just like, you know what? I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to dance, and I know I'm going to be in pain, but God, I know you're good, and I don't understand everything, but I just trust you. And then I remember after that, everything was over, and we went back to the hotels away from the village, because we were sleeping out in the village on the ground, and we had to have gunned guards. It was really intense out there. And we went back to the hotel. I was laying in my bed and by myself, And basically I would be able to lay for a few hours and then my spine would start burning. So I would have to get up and go to a room by myself, and I would hide. I didn't want anybody to know I was in pain because I didn't want them to think I was a burden. So I was like hiding it the whole trip. But I remember I was just like so full of, I was on a high. I was just so full of joy. I couldn't believe that all the things that had happened out there in the village. Like I couldn't believe that I had this moment where I unpacked all of my insecurity. I saw that I was so insecure. I saw that I was still waiting for justice from like back when my band totally didn't get a chance. I saw that like I was so bitter and angry at all the people who called me a one-hit wonder and didn't want to work with me in Columbus and treated me like I was like, I don't know, like repellent for success because I had failed. You know, I really still feel like that in many ways, to be honest. And it's a really weird vibe. So it's like it's mixed. And I felt so abandoned, and I saw all that and I just let it go. Not to say that I don't struggle sometimes, but it was a huge unpacking. And I remember I went home and I laid in that bed and I put in a Colby Kelly song, which is, do you know who that is? Mm-mm. You know that song that was like, and it goes from my nose, da 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 da
Yes.
da.
Okay.
So it's that girl.
Okay.
So she has a song, and it's like about girl power. It's about girls who try too hard. And it's like, you don't have to try. You don't have to try. And I was just listening, like, vibing out. And all of a sudden, I felt really weird, and I felt like the music was more beautiful than normal. And I was like, why does it feel like I can hear that instrument clearly? And then I just felt really weird. And I was like, what's happening? And I remember thinking, like, oh, my God, is this what drugs feel like? And then, because and then finally, I had this thought, check your injury. Because every time I would bend my ankle, it would shoot all the way up my left side of my body. And I got really nervous, and I was like, okay, and I checked it, and then all of a sudden there was no pain, and I freaked out, and I was like, okay, stop it, okay, I know it's gonna come back, it's all in my mind, it's like all those fake miracles where people think they're healed and they're not. I just had every single doubt you could possibly think of, and then I felt bad for doubting, because I was like, oh, what if it was real and I doubted? Now I don't have faith, it's not gonna work. And I just had every single thought, and I was feeling anxiety, and then all of a sudden I felt pain start to creep up, and I was like, oh, I knew it, and then I just heard, why are you so afraid of pain? And I was like, huh? I had no answer. And then it said, even if the pain comes back, I'm still with you. And then I just was like, okay. And then it left. And then I've been good since this day. And I came home, and I always told myself, if I ever get my leg back, I'm going to run after everything I want. So that's why my company is called A Run Song. And there's other reasons why it's called A Run Song too, but that's what it means. It's a song that makes me want to run. And I think, so that was my long answer, but I felt like I couldn't give you an answer without giving the backstory. Yeah. But why I make myself do it, why I decided, you know what, I think I'm going to make myself learn to do it. I was overwhelmed. I already knew that there was that thing out there with me. Like literally like one time this guy at the Hip Hop Expo used my name as an insult. He was like in a freestyle battle, and he like pointed to me in the crowd. He's like, you're a one-hit wonder like Gabrielle from Fatty Coo, which was the name of my band. And the whole crowd parted and looked at me and laughed, and even my friends laughed. And I remember leaving and never going back to that, like ever. Every time it comes out, I just don't go to that event. It's like, and like I just remember thinking like, now I'm really washed up. Now I'm like 30, and I'm going to look like I'm a loser who can't let go of my dreams, but I've got to do it. I just have to. And so that is why. It's because I have this like memorial to Africa, and there's so many more things that happen there, but I literally have it on my wall next to my door, and with a sticker that says adventure awaits. And I just think of like all the experiences I've had that when I realized that I was not living my dreams, when I realized how powerful my music was for those orphans, I realized I had no right to not do it, and that I can't live not doing it, but I had to find a way to do it on my terms. And I knew that if I'm going to do it, I needed to be heard. And if I'm going to do it, I need to have time to do it, which means I need to find a way to make money. And so I was like, I can't make money on music yet because no one cares about my music yet. So I need to find other things. But if I'm afraid if I get a regular job that I won't have any creativity left when I come home. So I was like, I made a commitment to only make music doing art. And so for 6 years, that's pretty much what I've done. Anything that has to do with art, so photography, videography, and social media stuff, anything. And pretty much as I went, the doors would just open at the right time, it seemed. And so far, that's how I got here. That's the short version, actually.
Whatever version you just shared, I absolutely love it. When you sit here today and you look back at all of these different battles with either not feeling good enough or not feeling like you are, for lack of a better term, like worthy of love, how much of that has changed now? How do you feel about those things now?
Well, I just went through a breakup, so actually, I still struggle, but I definitely am so many light years ahead of where I was. I have to still do a lot. I have to coach my mind a lot. I have to remind myself. That's why I put the things on the wall. I write notes to myself in my mirror. I work with kids to remind myself that I have something to give. You would ask me what I do before. I host workshops where I do songwriting workshops, and a lot of them are, I get to do stuff for mental health, and I get invited to partner with different organizations, which is super cool. And I love that. And so I just remind myself that I have worth by putting myself in situations that put a demand on my value. And I just wrote a song called Treasure, and it's coming out next. And it's literally saying I'm a treasure. It's just talking about my worth, because I needed to write that for myself. But I know it's hard. I honestly struggle still. I think I know I give a lot of disclaimers and I say oh, I know I'm weird, but you got to admit those stories are different. And I 100%. think that is very challenging for me, to choose to be myself in the midst of, even mentioning God. I know that's very, people don't like it, and it scares me. But if I'm not myself, I feel like I'm not honoring what literally led me to this point. And how can I expect to keep going? How can I? And I get anxiety sometimes about it. I just did a keynote speech at the Kelton House Museum for Juneteenth, and it went amazing. But I was scared. I was scared because I had been kind of rejected in different circles for not being a certain way of thinking. I wasn't angry enough as a Black person. I wasn't literally just stuff I'd been kicked out of spaces. I had a great opportunity happening, and I remember I wanted to not keep people from coming. It was hey, we need to make sure there's no racists coming. And I was how are we going to determine that? I would rather not make it harder to come, and I would rather just trust that what we're doing and what we're walking in and offering is going to be a great opportunity for people who are coming from different backgrounds to see that the person next to them is actually going through what they're going through, because that's how you make change. That's how people come out of those things. And they were what? No, we're not having mercy on these people that could be racist. And I was what are you talking? And this is, by the way, it's not Black people saying this. This is white and Black people. It's all together wanting me to hate white people more. And I just felt, I got kicked out of that spot for wanting to, be too, I want to, I get looked at as weak. I get looked at as weak. I get looked at as people, hear me talk about things that immediately make assumptions. And so that's really scary. But you just heard some of my story. The reason why I feel I need to give people mercy and believe in them and be willing to stand in this space and be vulnerable and invite them to let down their walls is because that's what happened to me. I realized that everybody's capable of having those same walls. We can label this one worse than this one, but the truth is we don't know what we would do if we were in their position, and I realize that it's not a Black or white problem, it's a human thing, and I don't want to see any more pain, and so I just want to give people what I had. And so I feel very unless you give me a chance to speak and really listen, if you already have a mindset that if you already decided what you think and you don't want to hear and meet people and listen, you're probably, I might not fit in that space. So I've definitely been rejected already. But if anyone actually gets to know me and actually hears my story, then they usually are oh, wow, you're a safest place I've ever, that's what people usually say. Wow, you're the coolest person, you're a safe place. Even if they don't agree with me or understand me, they're yeah, but you always make me feel safe. I can talk to you about anything. That's why I love coaching, vocals, because I've learned so much through being a voice coach, it's very interesting. It's a very vulnerable, sacred space when someone's using their voice. And I've learned that people get a lot of breakthroughs outside of singing when they're made to like really use their voice. And people cry. I've had people like stop the lesson and start crying and say, I can't do this, and then come back the next week and be like, all right, I'm ready. I've had people call me and be like, I never even liked my talking voice, and suddenly I like it and like cry. I've had many people cry. People have confessed their traumas to me. People have like used the whole hour as therapy session, just talk to me. I've had a therapist come, who is a therapist occupationally, come and just like use me as a therapist, and then like become a little 4-year-old right in front of me as I teach her how to sing. And I realized that something special is about your voice, and that's why I have to fight for my voice all the time.
So something you said in there that, well, there's a lot of stuff you said in there actually that I feel like I relate to on many levels. One of them, the first one that I want to talk on, is the idea of feeling weak when you don't fit into certain scenarios, right? Or somebody looks at you as weak, and then you walk away from that scenario being like, oh, I wasn't good enough for that, or I was pushed aside, or I was cast aside, or I was left behind, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I feel like, even though it's hard to remind ourselves of this all the time, how I tend to view that, now obviously there's some clear cases of like, oh, well, sometimes, yeah, something just doesn't fit together, and that's just what it is. But most often, and why I relate to that, is what I feel like I've noticed with so many different scenarios or people or whatever that I don't fit in with, right? That I give what I feel like is my best effort. I give my best energy, and they say, maybe they don't outright say it, but it's sort of presented, and I'm pushed aside as you're not good enough, or you're weak and you can't really give to this, or whatever it is. Truthfully, the way that I tend to look at that is that I look at those situations as, oh, my unique power just simply does not fit with what they need, rather than I don't have any power. You know what I mean? So like, I tend to look at those and I'm like, okay, like we all have these unique differences about each other. And I think it's really powerful when we learn to understand those things, and we learn to understand our why and our purpose and the intention that we do things with and all that sort of stuff, effectively tapping into really what's inside of us that makes us us. That is a huge journey that, like, you know, of course we're on all the time, but for me, I've become hyper aware of in the last like couple of years, of starting to learn, you know, as we all grow up and we get older, adulthood takes its course, and everybody's lives change, and everybody, you know, everybody's lives take on different forms. And I have personally found myself, because you said something like this, I've personally found myself struggling really, really, really hard over the last like 2 years of trying to figure out where I fit in with those around me and the world at large. And not so much that I need acceptance, even though that's like a part of it, of like, of course you want someone to be like, Gabrielle, I love every single idea that you just said. Of course we should do that, right? In the same way that I want someone to be like, Ross, every single thing you think is dope. And of course that's just not how it's going to work, right? And so like, what I feel like I've uncovered in that is like, while I'm identifying like, oh man, why is everyone's lives looking different? And friends that I used to talk to daily, I talk to them every couple months now, and they don't exactly have time to hang out. They don't really want to work on creative projects together. They don't want to share life in the same way that we have been sharing, right? But I did a lot of work on my life to be able to become a version of me that is built off of strong connections and sharing with others. That is like now where I find myself. And it's hard when you're not met with something that's ready to reciprocate that, right? Or receive it, or whatever it may be. When you're not met with another party who's like, I feel your energy that you're trying to put out. I accept it. I'm giving it back. Let's go. Like, and that doesn't have to be in a creative project. That can be in a conversation. That can be in an interaction, whatever it is, right? So for me, I've been going through a similar battle, or at least I'm hearing things that you're explaining that I can relate to in this way, of feeling like the way that I've been explaining it is that, and this is, so I'm going to get super like emo here for a second. The way that I've been explaining it is the way that it feels is that I spent, you know, we all build our own worlds, right? And we want nothing more than to be able to welcome people into those worlds and share those worlds with other people, right? I feel like I've spent so many years like hyper focused on trying to figure out who I am, really what I want to do, not the things I do. I'm not the things I do. I'm not a film director. I'm not a podcaster. Those are all extensions of me and my purpose that I feel like I have here, right? So it's figuring out who I am. And I've done all this work, and I feel like I have built this like incredible world that I'm like, oh my God, I did so much hard work. I've got this world so ready to share with everyone. And this is going to sound overly dramatic. But where I found myself in the last like year or so is that it feels like no one wants to come check out my world.
Aww.
No one wants to experience that world. And that's not saying I don't have any friends or I don't experience great things or I don't have... It's not that there's zero, right? But it's just that it looks different than what I had hoped, right? It's like I'm sitting and I've done all this work on myself and I'm like, I like genuinely sitting today, and I know we're just meeting for the first time, so this means very little in the context of things, but like I am undoubtedly the most confident version of myself that has ever existed. And I don't mean that in a cocky way or anything like that. Just I am very just confident in who I am. And what I want to give, what I want to receive, like all this sort of stuff. And it feels strange because now that I have found myself being such a happy version of me, it hurts more when people don't want that.
Aww.
You know what I mean? Like, to where it's like, oh, wait, I'm so happy to experience this moment with you. Not out of like, it's not me being like, why isn't anyone praising me? It's not that at all.
Yeah, I know, I understand.
It's just, hey, I have the space, the time, and the energy to give and share with someone else. And sometimes it's just the case of someone else isn't ready for that time, space, and energy, and that's just how it is.
Yeah.
But on any level, whether it's people you work with or people you're friends with or relationships or whatever it may be, it takes such a harder hit when... if we were living in chaos of like not knowing who we were, not knowing what makes us happy, not knowing what we want in life, all this sort of stuff, and chaos is happening, you're kind of just like, oh, craziness is happening. Of course, my life sucks. Like, so it's what a lot of us tend to lean into, right? What makes it so much stranger, and this is me giving it right back to you of like, you've said so much during this conversation that like, oh, my life is so weird. I feel like my life is also incredibly weird. There are so many things that I'm like, I have such a weird life. This doesn't make any sense. Like, why would I tell somebody that story? Because they're going to be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, dude, just fucking do this, right? But like a part of that is, again, like the version of me that I've become. It feels so strange to see my life in this way and want to welcome people into it. But I almost find I'm getting more, not even like consciously being pushed back on by people. It's not like people are like, your fucking life is dumb and you're weird, I don't want to be friends. It's not that. It's just like by happenstance, this is how it feels. But it's like I've built this version of my life and this version of me that I'm very happy about.
Yeah.
But because it's so weird and so unique and so different from maybe a lot of those around me, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't fit in a lot. And it's like, the type of conversations I like to have are conversations like this, right? I genuinely believe that if you and I were just sitting and getting coffee somewhere, we'd probably be having a pretty similar conversation, to be honest.
Probably.
Like, I would still be asking you probably the same questions.
I'd
like, all
still
right,
be telling you my life story.
Exactly. I'd be like, tell me everything, and let's just sit here with copy for 6 hours, right? Because again, like I know at my core, like who I am and the type of conversations I like to have, the way I like to connect with people. But ultimately, I now look at my life, even though I'm like happy with it. And of course, there's always things to be worked on. And by no means is that saying everything's perfect. There's large gaps that need to be fixed and filled and maintained. But I look at that and it's very strange to be so happy with something that no one else can identify.
Yeah.
And to me, hearing so much of your story is like, even though you had this battle with your own self-worth, that you do at times still find yourself in a position where you're like, I now know my worth, but it is so hard when someone or an entity, whatever it is, is telling you that like, no, this value that you're really happy about, like it hits different when someone makes you feel less valuable on your best day than it does on your worst day.
Yeah, explain that.
So what I mean by that
I mean, I know what you mean, but explain why. I want to hear why you think that is.
For me, it's like, I think it's very easy to almost just sort of go with the flow of things when you're feeling down and something bad happens, right? You're like, yeah, of course it's going to happen. But when you're feeling the opposite,
you feel the injustice.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
Yes.
And it's not. But I'm awesome.
and it's not necessarily main character syndrome, right? Of like, why doesn't everyone love me? It's like, no.
No, it's you're just aware of what you want to give, and it hurts when people don't take it. Okay, like once again, it might sound. I don't know. I'm gonna stop giving disclaimers. I'm just gonna be myself.
You and I are very similar in that way. Even though I've been doing this show for 3 years, I'll like get ready to go on like this like rant that I really believe in, and I'm like, just so you know, like I don't think I'm that smart. Like it's okay. Like
I think you figured out a little bit on me enough to kind of know how I talk now. No, but I actually realized that because there's like a thing where you feel weird when you finally know your worth, that you feel bad that no one cares. Because like, well, if I knew my worth, why would I care? And you start to wonder, like, does it mean I'm still insecure that I cared that they rejected me? But I actually realized, once again, it came back to my faith. I was like, wait a second, Jesus literally felt rejected. He literally was perfect and he felt rejected because he was aware of what he wanted to give people. And there's like a verse where it says, for so long did I wish to gather you in my arms like a mother would her hens, but you wouldn't let me. And I was like, well, damn. If God himself can feel rejected, then I have to realize that like that's a valid feeling. And it doesn't mean that I just want attention. First of all, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting attention. I think that we are made to have healthy attention. That's like babies need that, you know? But I'm just saying, like, I realize that, yes, you're right. The more I'm finally aware of what I want to give and what I have to give, when you put everything out there and you sacrifice and you get it perfect as you can, and you create this, whether it's a space for people or a song or a podcast or anything, and it's not received, you're disappointed because you're aware of what it could do for someone. And even if it's not perfect, it's not exactly Jesus, but it's still got some good stuff in there, and you know that, and it hurts. It hurts. But I think that for me, let me ask you, how do you get through that feeling?
It is constantly a work in progress.
Oh, okay.
As I feel like most things are. There are good days, there's bad days, there's days where it's like, hey, I can deal with this and it's okay. And there's other days where I'm like, ooh, I really need a friend to text me and kind of reaffirm that like we're friends and that I'm worth something. Like 100%. So by no means am I going to sit and be like, oh, I've got the answer. It's step 1 through 3 right here and I've got it, right? But for me, it's like as often as I can in any situation, I remind myself that one, whatever this feeling is right now isn't always going to be forever.
Yeah.
So again, on those bad days, it's like, okay, this is a bad day. It doesn't mean that all days have to be bad days. And it doesn't mean that I also have to become those feelings.
Yeah.
And it's also the reminder of when we feel those things, this is what ever since I learned this, I try to remind myself of this a lot, is like, you know, if I'm having a day where I'm super depressed, right?
Yeah.
I'm more so going to make sure I lean into the fact that I feel depressed, but I am not depressed in that sense, right? That's not what I am. I'm not going to embody those things.
That's
and it's a hard battle, right? Yeah. To look at those things and be like, this situation made me feel this way.
Yeah.
But genuinely, like, and I literally have been saying this to people over like, you know, recent happenings in my life that I've been having a lot of conversations where I'm like, I don't feel my worth is that high. What I've literally been saying to them is like, it's so hard because what I think, what I know and what I feel have been in battles. And what I mean by that is I think often those can be two different things. At least in my weird brain, they are.
Most people, I think it is.
Yeah, where like I sit and I'm like, I know, like just factually for me in my life, I know that I have value. I know that I have talent or skills. I know that I matter to people. I know I do. Not in a fame or attention way. Just I know I have made genuine connections with people and that matters. But what I'm feeling right now is none of that.
Yeah.
And so trying to balance those things out,
You kind of coach yourself and.
Yes, I try and remind myself that it's like, okay, let's remind ourselves, like, we can feel the feelings 100%. I'm going to feel this like sad moment that I'm in right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't exist. So I'm going to feel it for all that it's worth and whatever I need to feel, because I'm going to learn something from this, or it's going to just add another scar to me that shows some battle wounds, that shows that I can get through it, whatever it is, right? But what I think and what I know, I have learned to differentiate those things.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is one of few things that has like really kind of kept me going through anything that I've been battling in the last like couple of years or whatever, because there's been like some pretty heavy dips of like, oh yeah, my self-worth is real low. Yeah. Even though I'm sitting and I'm like, I'm such a confident, happy version of me finally, right?
Yeah.
I'm chasing so much less on the outside because I found out everything that's on the inside. And I'm learning how to use that to make more of what I want on the outside, right?
Amen.
Because for years, like early on in my creative journey, for example, like I was just like chasing after everything all the time. I wanted a bunch of likes on Instagram for a cool picture I posted. I wanted a cool musician to hit me up with a huge following for a music video, or I wanted, a short film that I shot to like go viral on the internet, whatever. Now, like, I can identify all of those things that also just kind of the way that the world is nowadays has sort of programmed us to have those weird battles with the internet. But I've learned to look at a lot of those things as byproducts.
Yeah.
Of, am I really happy? Am I really doing the things that I want to do? Right? Like the most recent short film that I posted, I genuinely could not have cared less how many views it got. I literally don't. I haven't even looked. I haven't looked since I posted it. I was just happy that I made it, that I spent time with my friends and my crew making it, and that I got to share it with people, right? Yeah. It's the same thing with this podcast. Like, would I love for everyone in the world to be hearing these conversations and learning things from them and connecting with people and all this sort of stuff? Of course. But that's a byproduct of making something exist to begin with. Yeah. I can't make it exist only if this thing. Right. And now I'm the one that's like I'm going all over the place. And now I'm like, hey, I'm going to try and bring it back.
It's just like when I was saying I couldn't write now because it had contaminated. Like, it has to be good enough now. That sucks.
And that's like so much of what I look at is like, I try to remind myself, like, is this good enough for me?
Exactly.
And even what I was saying earlier of like when you feel rejection, or when we get rejected in some way, it's like, I literally just saw this the other day, so I didn't make this up, and I'm going to butcher the explanation anyway. But like, it's the idea of like, rather than looking at it as I wasn't good enough, I wasn't talented enough for them, I wasn't special enough for them, or whatever, it's to reverse that and look at, okay, well, maybe they actually weren't a good fit for you.
Yeah. For real though.
And when you're the one that like feels everything super heavily, and I'm not saying other people in other situations don't. Yeah. But when you're the one, like, we know our own emotions. Yeah. No one else knows what's going on in our heads, our hearts, our souls, whatever, right? No, so there's never another person in an interaction who's like, I bet Gabrielle's probably feeling exactly like this, or I bet Ross feels exactly like this about that, right? It's like, we're the only ones that are living with all those feelings. So of course it's going to feel a billion times more than maybe even what the situation was. Or it's the right amount, but we're the only ones that are dealing with it, just as if any other person involved in that is dealing with it in their own way, whether they care, whether they don't, whether they, whatever. And it's like, that for me is so much of what I've tried to like, I always just try and connect everything back to what is my like actual value. And even when I'm telling myself that, much like you've said in a lot of your story, you would tell yourself things and you'd be like, is that really though? Like, they're really, come on. Like, I'm just trying to like be positive to myself. I don't want to be
disappointed,
Right. It's like, I don't want to be like, but it's like, the weird thing is too, is that like, like there's a saying that I love that's like, you've made it through every one of your worst days. You've got an undefeated record against every one of your worst days. So when you can sit and you're able to say that, it's using that as ammunition of like, I can sit here right now and like, this is stuff that like in the last couple months when life things have happened, I have had to tap into that and be like, okay, we've experienced things like this before and it still sucks. Doesn't mean that we downplay our emotions or our feelings. It doesn't mean like that, that's the whole conversation about positive mindset, right? When you think positively, it doesn't mean acting like nothing's wrong.
Right.
It's acknowledging those things, embracing those things, and seeing it as like, I'm going to feel this for every bit of what I need to feel this for. But what can I do about it after that?
Yeah.
What does it do for me? What does the situation teach me? And like, that's not clear on day one.
Yeah.
It's definitely not clear on day one. It's not even clear on month one sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, it's reminding yourself of that also, of like, we've made it through every one of our worst days so far. And this might be another worst day. And cool, we add it to the list. Doesn't make it matter less. It actually matters more, if not, because we're acknowledging it. We are understanding the power that it has. But even so much of what I feel like you've talked about too, that I'm going to bring it back to, is like understanding like our own power.
Yeah.
And our own strength. Because like it's wild, and of course everybody has their ups and downs in their story. So I'm not saying like this I shouldn't have heard from your story. Like, I'm not going to sit and be like, what? There's no way you should have been sad at any point in time. I preface that to say, sitting here and just meeting you today, I'm like, Gabrielle's like one of the coolest people I've ever met, based off of not the things you've done, but like the energy that you hold.
Oh, thanks.
Right? Just your energy, your attitude, your just way of expression. That to me is, I'm like, oh wow, like as you're telling me all these things, like literally what was going through my mind as you're sitting and you're like, yeah, I felt like I, didn't have worth, or I felt like I didn't know how to receive love, or, whatever. I'm sitting here and I'm like, so how do you become the person who's sitting here right now? Because I know this sounds over dramatic, but like just meeting you again for the first time today, sitting across the table from you, I'm not saying you shouldn't feel any of those things, but as somebody who is getting to know you for the very first time, I'm seeing a version that I'm like, you're an incredibly powerful person. And it's like, I feel like I see that energy, those powers, those thoughts, those, whatever. And so it is like wild to me to hear those things, because I'm like, wow, like that's not, even if you still have those battles today, which of course we all do, I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm presenting myself in the exact same light, right? I'm like, I'm the happiest version of me, but, would have cried 4 days ago over something super hard, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's like learning that inner value, learning what our true strength really is. And I feel like I can absolutely get a sense, unless you're a really good actor, then 100% you're an amazing actor then. You've got me fooled. But like, I feel like I can see all of that in you. And I feel like that is almost like one of the largest lessons that I'm even taking from your story, is that you can be made to feel, and even still actively be made to feel, less than or not as important or unwanted or whatever. But when we figure out how we shape our own world around our actual wants and needs and the thing, like we begin to identify why those certain things aren't fitting in. Yeah. And like, that doesn't just solve anything. Like if someone's a asshole to you, it's not just like, oh, well, they just didn't fit into my life. Like,
I know.
It's like, no, that person's probably just an asshole. But that's also okay to identify.
Yeah. I know. I like that you said that. Because I'm learning to do that now. Because I was such a like, oh, I'm probably the wrong one. I'm sorry. I need to fix it. Oh, I don't deserve. I told you, I was like, I don't deserve to walk. Mm-hmm. That may or may not be true. I think I actually struggle with the language of deserve. And I know that sounds crazy, but one of the ways that I will work through that is I'll be, instead of, because a lot of this, and I'm not saying I never say, oh, I deserve that. Like, I deserve the best. I deserve, to be loved and all that. I say stuff like that. But sometimes I don't feel like that's true. And I just, instead of trying to fight it, I'm like, well, if I don't, then no one does. So then I guess I goes back around. I guess why not me? Right. Because it starts to feel like, well, why do I deserve to be on that stage? And I'm like, because no one else does, or everyone does, because we're all no one's perfect. Not to interrupt you, but I also feel like on that same plane of like, okay, maybe we all deserve and don't deserve these things all at the same time. Yeah, right? Exactly. But at the same time, everyone has and there's differences and all this sort of stuff, but everybody has it in them at some different point to maybe find that opportunity, to make that opportunity, to figure out what in them can get to that point of getting on the stage or starting a business or whatever, just living life and being happy, right? Yeah. Everybody
has the opportunity to have some form of a happy life in some way. It's going to be very, very difficult for some people, and there's other people who it's probably a lot easier for, all that sort of stuff. But I think when I think about deserve, I often flip it to earn. Mm. So it's like, rather than us looking at like, oh, well, I deserve to be on that stage, or I deserve to have eyes on me, or I deserve whatever. It's like, I earned this opportunity. Right?
I don't know if I'm there yet.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I sucked. Like, I wasted, like, a long time not believing in myself. And honestly, I feel like I don't deserve it. But I feel like it's the grace of God. And I just don't want to reject that because I waited so long to even know that I could have it. And so I just actually try to embrace it as, like, well, maybe I didn't deserve it or do everything that maybe, who knows what the standard is of what I should do to even earn it. I would probably make a thing, and I honestly would probably take that and ruin it. I'd be like, I need to earn everything, because that's how I used to be. I was like obsessive compulsive, trying to be good enough. So I just tell myself, you know what, honestly, it's hopefully I just, if it comes to me, I don't want to waste it. I'm gonna do my best, and as long as I know I did my best, I feel like I've honored the opportunity that was presented to me. And that's all and I can feel proud of that.
Yeah.
I can feel proud of that.
I almost feel like that's almost how I picture the earned thing though.
Yeah.
Right? Is like, I no longer will sit day to day and be like, I'm earning this, or I have to earn that, blah, blah. Like, I'm not really tapped into that, right? I'm just like, I'm just doing things. And of course I hope some things work and I'm uninterested in other things. I don't think until that moment where I have that moment to achieve the accomplishment or embrace the opportunity or even experience it. It's almost like I feel like I almost think of the earn thing after like the race is over.
Yeah.
Right? Where I'm like, and rather than like, I deserve that first place trophy. That makes
sense though. You're right though. But I think there's a balanced, healthy way to look at it. And I'm still learning that because when I got my keynote speech, that was actually my first keynote. Like, I've
dope.
Like it was my dream, and I wish I could tell you the story. I feel like I'll talk again though. I wish I could tell you. Oh my God, it's so cool. But my friend, I was saying like, I don't feel like I belong up there. I'm struggling. I know that it's for me. And he was like, you definitely did a lot. And he was like walking through like, you do deserve it. Not in like a vain way, but he was like, you realize that this is a fruit of what you've been doing. You kept getting back up. You kept doing this. And he was like, it's okay to say that and stand on that. Because I didn't know how to do it without balance and be too confident in myself. So then I was the opposite. And I felt like, oh, okay. Like, if I think about it, like, you have to believe there's a reward for your faithfulness, or else you wouldn't be faithful. You have to believe, like, if I water this plant every day, it's going to grow. So when it finally grows, you don't say, well, I didn't deserve that. You just say, oh, thank God that it worked. Okay, awesome. Mm-hmm. But you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so I'm learning to look at it like that. Like, okay, look at the fruit of what you've done. But at the same time, I'm trying to balance that out with, like, but don't think that, like, don't look too much at, like, don't overanalyze every little thing you do. It's like, I'm trying to find that right now.
But that's the constant balance.
Have you found that?
I feel like
because then it's like, if I look too much at it, I'm like, I could have done so much more though. And so I'm like,
I am on the, like, I think the curve of that right now, where I'm like identifying that I would do that a lot, identifying that sometimes I do. But, like, I've found, like, and it's so funny, every time I have this conversation with people, like, because I have, again, these types of conversations a lot, where people are like, how do we balance this, and how do we balance that, and what the heck is this? And I'm like, well, one, we're all just figuring it out. None of us have any idea.
That's literally the truth.
That is 100%. Just because we're sitting here with cameras and microphones on a podcast, I have no idea. You have no idea. Because the challenge also changes every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, we're going to find whatever consistency we can, but the challenge is always going to be ever changing. It's like an infinite video game, right?
Yeah.
We got to a new level and we accomplished that last level, but guess what? This next level, it's going to be a little bit harder probably than the last one.
Yeah.
But you've accumulated experience points and tools and skills from level 1 that are now useful in level 2.
Exactly.
Which is going to help us get through level 2. You know what I mean? Like, that's so much of it, right? But it's understanding that, like, there's always going to be some sort of challenge.
Yeah.
There's always going to be some sort of something, but it's like, how can I look at it? How can I perceive it? Like there's another saying that I absolutely love that I've ingrained into my brain, and it's that what happens to us doesn't matter, our reaction to it does. And that doesn't mean that we pretend like bad things aren't bad, like I was saying earlier. If something bad happens to you, that is awful. But our reaction to that at some point gauges how terrible, how much it stops us, how much it devalues us, whatever it is. And that's a really hard decision to make. That's not just to wake up the next day and be like, that thing that happened doesn't matter because I'm going to look at it positively. It's like, that's not what it's saying.
Yeah.
But it's understanding that, again, that power can be in our hands still. Even when something happens to us, we determine what we do with that. Our reaction can determine, is this the end of the world? Or is it like a really, 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 really difficult roadblock that I'm going to have to work really, really hard to get through? But is it a roadblock? And can I get through it? Yes. Do I know how? No clue right now. No fucking clue. But I can. And at some point, hopefully I will. And that, and then it becomes, that's when we then like earn our way through that roadblock at some point, right? But to go back to like what we were originally talking about is like, I feel like I've been talking about this sort of stuff with people so often recently is like, this is another like weird part of my life that I'm like, I feel like a alien because so much of what I've been through and have experienced and the bad and the good and the fun and the ugly and all this sort of stuff, I have worked really hard and almost just sort of naturally found myself and taken the opportunity to pay attention to the fact that like I have recently uncovered like a strange like balance in my life. And that doesn't mean, again, this is me prefacing things. That doesn't mean that everything's awesome and everything's perfect. Not even close.
I love you've said that a few times.
And yes, I do the same thing that you were saying.
I see it now.
Yes.
I'm not saying I'm perfect.
100%. I will say that a billion times, right? But like, when I talk to the easy examples, like I'll talk to creative friends.
No, but you seem like
right?
you're confident.
I am.
Yeah, and I see that.
And like, I talk to like, for the easy example is like creative friends, right? Who are like, I want to do this creative thing and have fun, but my job is in the way and real life is in the way and it's all just chaos and I don't know what to do. And like, when I hear that, like for me, my perspective on that is now so different because for the last decade plus of my life, I was working on figuring out how to balance all of those things.
Yeah.
Where again, not all of our journeys are the same.
Right.
That's the other thing, right? That's why we're going to sit here on this podcast and be like, we don't have it all figured out and what we say might not work for everybody. Like, because everybody's on different parts of their journey and everyone's journey is going to go different too. Not everyone is going to hear one positive quote and be like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to change my life now. Like, it's just not how it happens.
Yeah.
And also, like, not everybody is, and I don't mean this to sound negative, but not everybody is totally going to be willing to put the work in.
No, that's true. No, that's a real, and that's where I think the balance of like not being entitled to attention or the stage or all those things, but having a real sense of like, but I need to work for it, and it's not going to come easy, and like anything that's worth having has a cost. And I think that's what I'm learning is like, I'm realizing that it's important for me in the same way it's important for me to not feel entitled and so that I don't feel rejected or all those things like too much, to realize like, no, I need to actually acknowledge like my accomplishments and the effort so that I can receive the reward of it, because that will increase, that'll make me more excited to work harder. And so I'm like learning to like shed that false humility and realize, wait, no, hold up, I did get back up. I'm proud of myself. Like, you know what? It's going to be okay.
Right. Being your own biggest fan, being your own cheerleader, like identifying those things. And that is why I sit and like, again, some days the scale goes like this and it goes super wonky and I'm like, oh, I got to do a lot of work to get that back to balance.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of power in understanding that balance, that like zen, that middle ground is there. And I think that's what a lot of us have a lot of trouble identifying. Like I was saying, when I talk to a creative friend and they're like, I want to do this creative endeavor, but I've got this job that is just so shitty and I hate it and blah, blah, blah. And I never have time for this and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, one, there's a lot of self-reflection you got to do. There's also a lot of work that you have to do if you truly want the thing to work. Yeah. But I also think that we don't always have to look at everything as all or nothing. Yeah. You can look at it as balanced in the middle. And it's like that I literally have like, and for a while, it's weird to say this because for a while I didn't want this. I wanted everything. I wanted it all. But now I want everything in a very different way. I want everything in a, if it happens to me and I get to experience it, I'm glad that I get to experience it. Not as the kind of how we've been talking about of like, oh, I deserve to be on that stage because I worked so hard. I'm like, man, if I got to that stage, that'd be dope. I have worked really hard. I'd love to say that I earned it. But guess what? If I don't get on that stage, but I just get to be in the room and experience somebody else on that stage, maybe that's really dope because this experience is cool regardless.
Right.
Like it's looking at like
or
that.
Like for me,
side.
It's even like what I've learned to do is like if I don't get on this stage, I'm so proud that I actually thought I deserved to be on there. Like I literally sent in whatever it was to audition for it. Like I'm proud of myself for that. I feel like I succeeded already.
That is the key, I think, and that's where like I feel like I try to remind myself so often of that balance of like if you've done even a version of the thing, like you've already done the work, right? And the work pays off in different ways, and the more work we do, the more payoff or the more opportunity that might come and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of the times it's looking at like what have I already achieved? Yeah. What is the like I gave it a shot. Yeah. That's worth something. And that doesn't mean that we just have to quit, but like
it's something that you said I want to point out. You were saying earlier, like it's not about like what you do but it's more about like who you are. And you were telling me like, oh, it's not what you've done, but it's like your energy and blah, blah, blah. I feel like that's why that's true. Because when you're saying like, I want to be there and I feel like I've done my best to get there, but I acknowledge that already tells me who I am, is that I've put in everything it would take. I've done my best of what I can control, and I'm proud of that. And I feel like that's why you can be confident and appreciate whatever happens next.
Because like, an example for me is like, I love making short films and skits and all this sort of stuff. And there are so many stories that I have not told that I would love to see exist. I can also acknowledge and oddly be comfortable with the fact that I am not putting in the right quote unquote amount of work or in the certain specific ways to really become like the next coolest director, filmmaker making movies. I'm not. But I can acknowledge like, oh, I'm not doing certain things that maybe would be good for me to do. And I'm actually okay with that because my win is still, did I make a short film? Did I make a 3-minute version of that feature-length movie that I wanted to make? Sure. I got it out of my head. It exists. That's the cool thing. Like I had somebody on this show forever ago, and he was in a band, and he was talking about how like he had found comfort in it didn't matter like how big his band got because the win was what they already accomplished. And he was like, the cool thing is he's like, there wouldn't be a song called blah 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 that me and my friends wrote if we didn't get together and make it. That exists strictly because we got together and we made it. So like that's also the cool thing about when it obviously comes to like creating things, right? Is like the win most of the time is just in creating something. Yeah. It's like, did you make something exist? Amazing. And now obviously social media in the world tells us that if everybody in the world didn't see it and think it was valuable, that it's not valuable, and that's not the truth. Even though we would love that, but at the same time also a bunch of weird negativity also comes with that too. So it's like,
hey, that's the truth.
Yeah. So it's like, what balance do you really like? I remember a couple things that I've posted over the years like went like even semi-viral. And as soon as hate comments started rolling in from people who didn't know me, didn't even know what this was, just hating to hate, I was like, gross. Oh, I don't want that at all. Yeah. I don't care. Yeah. I don't care. I'd rather 500 people see this thing and be like, yo, dude, cool work. Great, man. Rather than like 1 million people see it and half of those 1 million people be like, what are you, stupid? And me be like, oh, God, that hurts. Like,
right. No, that's real, though. Yo, that's so real, though, for real. That's why I be... I don't know. You asked me earlier, like, how did Hollywood shape me? I'm like, well, it taught me that fame is overrated. And it taught me that if someone can literally think the world of you and then, like, a few months later say she's not famous enough and I'm still the same amount of talented, even more so, because I've grown and learned, that's when I'm like, do I really want to be sized up like that?
That's the thing. We talked about this earlier, is allowing your self-worth to be determined by somebody else. Yeah. That is what so much of that is. And I'm not saying that if I became the next coolest film director and everybody loved all the movies I made, I'm not saying I wouldn't be like, oh no, please. Like, of course, I'm going to be like, oh, this is pretty dope. Like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. But I'm also
But you'd have more to battle with. And you're aware that, like, that's an additional battle you'd have to invite into your life, and you're just counting the cost of that and being okay with it not happening.
Yes. And like another weird thing, and again, I don't know if this just becomes or comes with becoming like an actual adult and getting older and all this sort of stuff, but like when I'm talking about the whole balance thing, like being in the middle, like I have this very strange comfort where like if all of this stuff that I did went away tomorrow and I had to live like whatever version of a normal life is for me, I'd be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I genuinely would. Because again, I'm not attaching my worth and why I'm here to if I'm doing a podcast or not. Do I really, really love making a podcast and having conversations like this? Absolutely. Do I love getting to share that with an audience? Absolutely. Yeah. But if for some reason I couldn't do this, guess what? I said it earlier. If you and I were just getting coffee and there was no social media to put this on, we'd be having the same conversation.
Yeah.
And it's like at the end of the day, like, yes, do I love having these creative outlets and love having social media where we can plaster all this sort of stuff and look cool and sound cool and all this sort of stuff? 100%. I love sharing things. I love creating things.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if like whatever could happen and all of that changed tomorrow, I have a very odd comfort with being like, well, cool, I accomplished a whole lot. And now I am confident and okay with who I am, which means I'm confident and okay with whatever I do from here on.
Yeah.
Like, because I know that anything I do, because I am aware of like the value that I see in myself, whether it's in skills and connection in whatever, I know that like there's going to be a reflection of that in anything that I do.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if next week I became like a farmer and went off the grid, like I'd be like, I'd have like the coolest farm. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. And I know that sounds so like otherworldly or like big or dramatic, but
that's how I think. I think the same.
Yeah.
I think the same. And I actually feel like I worked in corporate sales. I worked in a bunch of different jobs. And for me, I feel like, sorry. I'm so sorry. I get insecure because every story I have, I swear I like have some parable, but and I feel like I just know it anyways, but that's just how I am. I really am. I promise I would not be here if it wasn't for my relationship with God. So it just comes out, and then I'm so aware that everybody don't want to hear it. So I'm like, ugh, but I can't help it. It's literally who I am. Yeah. So like when I was working in all those different jobs, it felt like preparation, and I really felt this strong sense of like how you do this is how you're gonna do the next thing. And even though you don't know what the next thing is, this matters. And I would feel this strong conviction, like, be the best you can absolutely be, and take the limits off and see how far you can get, even though this doesn't matter, even though you're not going to get credit, even though nobody cares and this is not your dream job. And I felt like I found comfort in this story. Have you ever heard the story of Joseph? It's like, there was a movie, a DreamWorks movie, and it was like Joseph, the King of Dreams.
I don't know. I don't think so.
So basically, Joseph is it's a Hebrew story of a guy who had a dream that he was gonna be big and rule and do all these things, but he was bullied by his brothers, he was thrown into a pit, he was sold into slavery, and he had a relationship with God in the story. So he just believed, like, God, I don't know why you have me here, but this isn't what I was meant to do, and I feel betrayed and I feel abandoned, and now I'm in a foreign land with different language, different customs, but I'm just gonna do my best, and if I'm not gonna actually be a ruler like I had my dream, I can rule at being a slave. And it sounds crazy, but he just was like, I guess I'm gonna clean these floors the best I can. And the person, he kept getting upgraded until he ended up being like a servant, and then he became the master of like the Pharaoh had this guy who was like close to the Pharaoh, and he became the master of his house to the point where he was like, you know, actually working a job. People had to respect him and everything, to the point where the wife of the guy hit on him, and then he was like, I have to respect, you know, my morals, and I don't want to betray my master. And so she like cried rape, and then he got thrown in jail. And so now he's back at the bottom, even lower than a slave, and he's like, I'm just going to be the best prisoner I can be. And so he becomes like the friend of the the prisoners, and people start to find solace in his comfort. He was like, even here, I believe there must be a purpose. There must be something I can learn. And he's just in the lowest of the low, breaking down like, God, why is this happening to me? But he started helping the prisoners and comforting them and helping them like with just a bunch of different things. And then like the prison warden started to realize like, I can trust this guy. So he started putting him over some of the prison parts until one day he ended up helping someone who ended up getting out of jail and being restored to his position near the Pharaoh. But even though that happened, he was like, yo, since you're getting back out there and I've helped you so much, will you put in a good word for me and tell them I didn't do this? And he was like, yeah, of course I will. Forgot all about him. And so then for years, he just ends up being there. And finally, there's a famine. There's something bad happening. There's a famine. And they're like, oh, wait a second. It was like some skill that was needed. The former prisoner remembered, oh my gosh, Joseph can do that. He helped me with that. And he ends up being brought out of prison. He ends up being able to have a solution for the nation and ends up being second in command. And then the brothers who threw him in and who were jealous, who sold him into slavery, they ended up having to travel to the Pharaoh to get food because of the famine. And he happened to be the one in charge. And he's like, oh, hi. And it's the craziest, coolest story.
Yeah.
And whenever I thought of that story when I was in my jobs, no matter what they were, I was thinking, if you really truly believe that you were meant for more, then act like it here. And that is what helped me. In every single job I've ever worked, I became the top salesperson in the whole company. Every job. And I get emotional sometimes when I think of the last job I had before quitting, like working for the rest of the corporate world. Not to say that I wouldn't again if I had to, but I learned so much at that job. And I remember everything I do, I feel like it's an opportunity to like hang out with God and like learn something and be like, hey, can you help me? How do I talk to this person? Or how do I learn to care about the person in front of me? And I felt like it just helped me to really do things for the right reason and trust that if I did it for the right reason and was faithful, then like you said, it would be like an overflow, like a result, like a side thing versus you chasing the result. And I would get caught up in chasing results because as soon as I saw myself with top sales, I would get, everyone's looking at me. Everyone's, oh, how'd she do that? What's she doing? Who does she think she is? Can she do it? Pressure. And I was like, okay. And I found myself like checking the sales and counting and comparing. And every time you get that feeling, it's like, okay, how do I still give my best now that I have the pressure? Because it was so easy when I was just trying to see if I could do it, Now it's like, how do I keep my heart's intentions pure without just throwing in the towel and be like, I don't want the pressure and then totally going. It's like, how do I walk this wire? And that's when I realized like, that's the big thing. That's what all these lessons are for. Because now that I'm trying to get back out into a city that literally a lot of people call me a one-hit wonder and get back out into a world that literally already I felt like they totally rejected me, and there's like a bunch of stuff out there that I didn't even bring up. I've had like people post throw up faces under when they found me, like, oh, it's that girl, ew, she got fat, and like, oh, she can't sing. Like, I've had mean stuff happen, and for me to like willingly go into that world again, knowing what's out there, I pull from all those moments where people were like, why are you doing so much for the boss? You literally run this company and they don't even pay you enough. You're like the company bitch. Like, and me being like, no, I'm doing this because of who I am and because I know God sees me. And I can do it and I can figure out a way to do it without getting caught up. And it's worth doing because I'm serving people. Now it's like, I have to actually believe that about my own music. Like, instead of trying to prove that I deserve this and I'm taking back my spot in Hollywood and, oh, you guys are wrong, which is what I want to feel sometimes. I'm like, no, I made this song because I fought to get back my songwriting. And this is a good song. I want people to feel what I felt when I made this song because it healed me. It made me feel amazing. Or it makes me have fun or whatever it is. And I'm like, and I'm going to work hard and I'm going to put money behind it. I'm going to do everything I can to get it out to as many people because I believe it's worth hearing. And that's enough for me. And I believe that, yes, sometimes I know that if I do that because it's good and I believe it's good because I worked hard on it, it's maybe people are going to look at me different, start treating me different and be like, oh, wow, Gabby, oh my gosh, hey, I see your song is out. And how am I going to react to that? Like, what am I going to do? There comes the pressure again. Am I going to find my identity in that? Or am I going to be like, thank you, you're right. And I'm going to like, it's like I'm walking through that right now. I'm walking through that right now. And it's just like all those times in the prison and like, I'm referring to that story, it's like those times in those low places, remembering my worth can also keep me in the high places to remember my worth. And I realize that now, like, oh, that's what that's for. I have to receive it and be like, thank you. I worked hard and that door opened. But I know that you can tomorrow totally throw me away. And so while I'm going to be grateful, I had to keep looking at it like, I'm not here to get anything from you. I'm here to give something. And I've already gotten what I need in creating what it was that I have to give. Mm-hmm. And if I keep remembering that, I know that I'll be okay. But it's definitely, I have to remind myself.
Right. If future Gabrielle showed up to you right now, what are you hoping that she would share with you?
Ooh. As soon as I think of that, I think two things immediately. One of them is really morbid. I know my best friend tells me to stop being so honest. Seriously, she's like, stop being too vulnerable. And I'm like, I know.
I feel like I have the same problem, so I understand.
No, the first thought is to be honest. I feel shocked. I'm like, oh, thank God I made it. Like, that's how I really feel at first. Because things can get dark sometimes. But then my second thought is like, duh, you made it. That's the first thing she's going to say. And then it goes, and honestly, I feel like in my dream of all that I want, that person has become a person of influence who is totally walking in all of the things that she worked for. And she's like, we did it, girl. It's real. It's real. Keep going, okay? And I'm like, okay.
Now, if you currently could go back to any point in your life and share something with little Gabrielle.
How little?
You get to choose.
Because that's too, like, if it was like 7-year-old me, I would just whisper, hold on, keep writing, don't ever stop, and it's always good enough. If it was teenage Gabrielle, I'd be like, fuck these boys. If it was early 20s Gabrielle, I would be like, you're not too old to go after your dreams. There's no expiration date. Don't waste any more time. And if that was now, I guess we already answered that. But if it was like a year ago, I would maybe tell myself, I don't know. I think I'd tell myself to like not date that boy. I don't know. It's hard for me to like even change anything about my life. Right now I'm in the situation where I'm feeling a lot of pain, genuinely feeling a lot of pain. But I think it's one of the things that, like, when you were saying earlier, like, you look at yourself and you've come into a place of confidence, like, you know you're going to learn something. I'm oddly proud of myself, even though I'm in a ton of pain, because I look at like my last heartbreak before this one, and I'm like, damn girl, you were so way worse. Like, you did not handle that at all.
Exactly the same.
Look at you, girl, getting up. You cleaned your dishes today. Like, I feel like I get up every day, and I didn't throw out everything that I learned and just hate myself, and I didn't throw away my faith and everything and have to rebuild again. I held on for dear life, and I was like, no, I know who I am. And I made the song Treasure. And I'm like, I'm going to put that out. I hope he watches. And I actually don't even wish any bad either. I actually don't. No, I've definitely, I'm just saying, I fought it. I fought spewing out any bitterness. And I'm like very proud of that.
I feel like you and I have had oddly similar journeys in the last however long those things have been. But you saying all that sort of stuff, I'm like, yeah, exactly the same on my end. So I have another question for you, but I've been doing something new on the show where I have the previous guest give me a question to ask the next one.
Okay.
So I have a question from the last guest that was on the show.
Okay.
And that question is, are you being honest with yourself?
I think so. Yeah, I think.
Do you feel like there's ever those moments? Like, do you feel like you have found yourself in a place now where, like, you know what that honesty looks like? And I ask that in the sense of, like, I think it's easy.
Was there a time where, you mean like in a time where you didn't realize you weren't being honest with yourself?
Yeah.
I think that I'm always being honest with myself, but I don't think I always... I think I'm constantly checking in, to be honest with myself, because I wasn't before. Like, I threw my personality out over and over again. Not just for, like, the world, but for church or for music, for just to fit, to keep a guy, to anything. And I think more and more, I think I know it's going to be the most fruitful if I'm just honest with myself. And so I think I am honest with myself now.
Do you have a question for my next guest?
Sure. I would say, do you feel free?
I love that. So, keeping on the theme of you coming up with questions, as we begin to wrap this episode up, there has been another new thing that I've been doing here on the show as of late, and that is where I give the guest the opportunity to put me in the hot seat, and we just reverse our roles here. So is there anything big that you want to throw my way? Is there any big questions that you want to ask me?
Yeah, kind of.
Ask away.
I kind of do, since we talked about being weird and having similar situations. How does going after your dreams affect romantic relationships?
So that is a gigantic part of a huge thing that the last two relationships that ended, they didn't necessarily end because of those things, but I, in a roundabout way, was kind of made to feel that they did. And what I mean by that is not like, oh, I was so busy with all these creative endeavors and career moves that I just didn't have any time for her. Wasn't that. But it more so comes from, you remember the thing I said earlier about, like, I've worked so hard to build this beautiful planet that I want to share with everyone, and no one wants to live on it, right?
Yeah.
That's ultimately what it is, where and this is, nobody likes a breakup. Nobody likes it. Whether it's, like, terrible, whether it's not as bad. And, like, my two most recent ones that, like, are the most freshest in painful, whatever it is, they didn't end in, like, terrible ways. They didn't. It was just like, hey, I don't think this is going to work, and here's why. But that why often kind of centered around the fact that I am sure of my life, and I am sure about the things that I'm doing, and I am sure about the people that I want involved in that, and I am sure about how I want to share that life. Mm-hmm. And in a weird way, that, whether fortunately or unfortunately, at some point it can be looked at in different ways, I'm sure, made them realize that they weren't sure about their lives, that they didn't feel like they had their lives together, that they didn't see things, and, like, not that we have to think the exact same way, but, like, looking at that and be like, wow, you're super sure about being with me, and I'm super sure about being with you, but also I'm not sure about my life in general, so I don't think this thing can fit right now. And so that's ultimately what ended up basically leading to the end of those things. So I describe all of that to say I don't know the direct answer to that, because I'm glad there was an answer there.
Yeah, no, that's the answer.
But, like, that is 100% something that I have been made to battle with in recent history. Is, like, it's, again, no one has said, oh, you're doing too much or you're whatever. Because, again, I've got a pretty good balance over my life where, like, if I started dating a girl tomorrow who was like, hey, I want to hang out, like, fucking all the time, I'd be like, cool, I have so much control over my life that I know how to make that happen, right? Because, cool, if I can see that it's the do the work thing that we talked about earlier, right? Yeah. I know when I want something or whatever it is, I'm willing to do the work. Mm-hmm. And because of me being that way, these recent breakups have felt so much worse because it's me being like, I'm willing to do the work to figure out these things that we're unsure of.
Yeah.
And they're like, cool, but just not right now. Yeah, maybe some other time, right?
This generation.
And ultimately, that just comes down to like the answer is like, oh, well, then clearly that, you know, and any story can end anyway, I guess. But like when you look at those situations, you can just be like, oh, well, clearly that was just not, that wasn't the person for you. That wasn't the relationship. It's just, if that's how the two parties viewed the things, then that's just not how it's going to work. And hopefully they figure out whatever they need to figure out, and you figure out whatever you need to figure out. And again, everybody's journeys look different. Sometimes they intertwine and it gets weird and it gets messy and whatever. But that is a thing that I have so freshly been.
Did you learn from that? Like, does that affect how you choose someone going forward?
I think it affects and maybe affects is the wrong word, but it almost in a way, it influences.
Help you decide?
It influences my decision making, but more so my honesty that I lead with in that sense.
Yeah.
Of not leading with like a trauma bond with somebody of like, well, my ex-girlfriend said I blah blah blah, like not that.
Is that
but more so.
You see, I'm like indirectly seeking advice.
And I don't know if my advice is the right thing or not, but I think it is something that, like, were they lessons I liked learning? Not at fucking all. Because it, unfortunately, that is exactly those things that I was talking about earlier of like something I know and something I feel being at war.
Yeah.
That is where I experienced that. I knew that I was, and you said so much of this earlier too, like I knew that I was worthy of love.
Yeah.
But did I feel loved at all? Not in the slightest.
Yeah.
Like the last full transparency, I don't know when exactly this episode will drop, so it might be different. But right now, at the time of us recording this, the last few months for me were gigantically bad battles of feeling unloved and unwanted.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, knowing that I have value, right? Of being like, wow, like I know that I'm a good person, right? I know that I try and do good things. I know these things. And no one's directly telling me the opposite necessarily.
Yeah.
But due to these circumstances, how I'm being made to feel is the complete opposite. I'm completely void of being wanted or cared for or loved. And that's false because, of course, we all have people in our lives in different ways.
Yeah, but
that's there.
From the person you want it from.
Exactly. That.
And that's valid.
Yes. It cuts in a different way, right?
Exactly. And
so I do think that it, like, now that I know that, it is going to help me. Like, I mean, if I was just giving you like a almost a materialistic, that's the wrong word, but a surface level list of like now what I know I'm more sure of when I look for a girlfriend, a partner, whatever. Like at the top of that list now has to be like, they actually have to be pretty sure about themselves and their lives too. That doesn't mean they have to be perfect. That's not what I mean at all.
But I know what you mean.
But there needs to be some amount of sureness and not this like, oh, my life is just so chaotic and I just don't know what happens and blah, blah, blah. Hey, you're in it for a minute. That's really awesome. Oh my God, wouldn't it be amazing if we've spent forever together? Actually, today, I don't feel that. See you later. Like, and again, anything can end and change at different times. And I know I was a little sarcastic when I said that. Like, I'm not even meaning that in a negative way towards anybody. But that is often like how it feels. Yeah. Is that I have become kind of a casualty of someone else's war.
Why are you saying my life? Why are you saying my life? I said, I want to hate men, but now you're just on the other, now you're the victim. So I was like, oh man, like, I really want to hate men. I'm like, it's men. That's what men do. I'm like, oh, apparently women do it too.
Yeah. Okay, and see, mind. And luckily, yeah, I don't, I can't say that like and again, even when I say that stuff, I'm like, oh, well, that doesn't mean I'm not saying that I hate any ex-girlfriend or anything like that. Like, I genuinely do not. Yeah. Because I can understand whatever they're going through. Again, I unfortunately got caught in the crossfire.
Samesies.
Do I like that? Not at all. Do I like sewing up that wound? Nope. But unfortunately, it's another one of those things. It's like, it is a pick yourself up and dust yourself off sort of situation of like, dude, I'm so sick of doing this.
Yeah, you just gotta learn for yourself.
But yes, but it's like, but I can. And again, it's you know, I think there is also value in the saying of like, to love somebody else, you gotta first love yourself.
Yeah. I hate that phrase. It's so cheesy, but it's true.
It's true, but I don't even think that like you loving yourself has to be 100%.
Yeah.
Because that makes it sound like you have to be so perfectly fine with your life that then you're ready to share with somebody else.
Yeah.
I think it's being so comfortable. Like, I think loving yourself is knowing that you are, quote unquote, being worked on or incomplete or figuring it out.
But that's why also, like you said, finding someone who's also willing to do the work is so important. And you don't know that. And sometimes you don't even know until the work is time for the work to be done.
Exactly. And that's the hard part, is that we don't know until we try. You really don't.
Yeah. Like, and I 100% agree. It's just like, damn. I think for once I don't regret something, because I really believe that I did my best for where I was at to choose the best. And I'm realizing like, wow, it's really important to find someone who's, what you said, confident in where they're going and willing to do the work.
Right. And that's the thing, is like, I think so much of what we've said in this episode too is like, real confidence isn't walking into a room and being like, I'm the most badass person in here. Real confidence is built in consistency.
Yep. Oh my God, that's the next episode of my podcast. It's going to be called The Courage of Consistency.
I love that. That is so dope. And it's like, I think that is that's real confidence, right?
Yeah.
It's not just
because
presenting yourself as something.
It's scary. I feel like consistency is scary, and that's why so my second I only have 2 episodes so far. It's like a new podcast. So the second episode is called The Myth of Ready, and the third episode is going to be called The Courage of Consistency, because I feel like ready is a myth. It's like when an opportunity presented and it's so clear and everything is telling you this is it. It's more about, are you afraid? Mm-hmm. Because if it's presenting itself to you in such an obvious way, it probably means that you should go for it. And this myth of ready is going to mess you up. But just go for it and trust that you're going to learn on the way. Nothing's going to be perfect when you start.
Exactly.
And so once you do it, in order to get there, you have to be consistent. And that's scary, because once you start, you're like, I just realized how much I suck even more because this is hard. But when you remember why you started and you're like, this person is worth it, or this dream is worth it, or this goal I have is worth it, and you get up and you have to face that thing every day. You have to face that today is going to suck, maybe, or today is going to be great, and then I'm going to have a high, and then it's going to hurt when I have a low. When that's really scary. And that's why people can walk away and be like, I think you're so great, I just not ready. I'm like, to me, ready is another word for I'm afraid. Not ready just means afraid.
Literally.
And that's okay. But I wish they knew that.
I 1,000,000% agree. Again, those are, as I've been, talking through the breakups and all this sort of stuff with friends, that's where the conversation lands. It's like, I understand the whole like, hey, maybe I wasn't ready sort of thing, but it's like, I also can understand that like, that just means you're afraid of.
Yeah, I think ready is an absolute excuse of a word. I don't like it anymore. But I'm holding myself accountable now.
Of course.
It's like, I'm realizing that I use that excuse that I'm not ready, but it's because I'm not believing in myself. Because if the opportunity has presented itself, a lot of times it's because I actually have attracted it.
That's the earned part we were talking about.
Exactly. And if I can learn, okay, I do have what it takes. It's not going to be perfect. I'm going to have to get up and do the work. That's the truth.
Because there's never going to be a perfect moment where everything aligns in the best way, or especially if it's in a relationship side of things, there's not going to be some perfect scenario where it's like, this person is perfectly happy and ready, this person is perfectly happy and ready, and life is perfect together, and there's nothing ever going wrong. Well,
the thing is, this is what I realized. What we want from anybody, and especially in that scenario, is like, there's a part of me that was like, when I was perfect, like on purpose, like I was like really trying, it was like nice, but deep down I wanted to be loved for my imperfections. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the point, is like, it's a trick, because we actually want to find the person that thinks we're worth the work. We want to find the person that actually we don't have to be perfect for. So I think you gotta, 100%. The process kind of comes and weeds that out, and it can be very hurtful, but it has to happen.
Right. And that's the hard thing. Like, that's just like everything, so much of what we've talked about today is like, that is just a part of the process. And like, we don't know until we try. And I can also look at certain things and be like, well, at least I'm glad that I tried. Yeah. Because I'm also like, I'm a really bad what if person.
Yeah.
Like, I will just play out a what if in my head.
You right,
over
though.
and
You
over.
right.
And it's like, even when it sucks really, really, really bad, and it makes me wish I never experienced it ever, I still, and this is just me, I'm not saying everybody has to think like this, but like,
You're such a disclaimer.
I
I'm gonna try to get you to like go through a whole episode and no disclaimers. That's
right?
what.
Yeah. I can still look at situations and see the value that they had while they existed. And that's not always fun, and I'm not saying that every single case is going to be that clear. But like, at least for me...
I'm not there yet. I'm still crying.
Yeah, no. 100%. 100%. But like, at some point, being able to identify those things, like, okay, it was what it was, and now I am what I am, basically. And that's the difficult process. And it's like, I think I just look, again, like, remembering that not... everything isn't going to align perfectly, and that is the hard thing of like,
also respecting free will of others.
Right,
that's the part. Even let's just say everything does align. Let's just say the stars spelled out this is the one, and the birds saying, I've had that happen, and I realize that even if that happens, if that person is really feeling the pressure or the fear, or they have something in themselves they need to heal, I have to respect that.
Yeah, who am I to tell them, like, no, don't heal the way you feel like you need to heal. Do it with me around.
Yeah. And
ultimately, like, in a way, contradictory statement here for a second, like, is that kind of what healthy relationships are? Is like you learn to kind of like coexist in your lives, and you experience each of your lives but together, and you heal together. Like, that is what a good relationship technically is supposed to be at the end of the day. But if somebody doesn't see that or doesn't feel that, who am I?
Yeah, it's like it's about, yeah, you're right, because it's like you want them to choose to stay and heal alongside you, but if they say no, you have to know that like true love requires free will. And so since what you want is true love, you have to respect their free will even if they say no.
Exactly, because that's ultimately the thing is like, if you care about that person, it's like, man, like, this is a case, like, I got to take the bullet here. Like,
even if I care about myself, I don't want somebody who doesn't want to be here.
Also that.
I'm like, no, bye.
Yes, that is like, because that's another thing, and this goes for like business or creative or relationships or friendships or anything. It's the classic case of like, if they wanted to, they would. Mm-hmm. That phrase. If they wanted to, they would.
Yeah.
And it's not that easy. It doesn't mean that people can just make decisions like that. Sometimes there's thought, sometimes there's processing, all this sort of stuff. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if they wanted to, they would.
Yeah.
You and I had to reschedule this podcast
over and over again, but we made it happen.
That's the thing.
Because
if I didn't want you to be on this show, or I didn't really care to get to know you, or whatever it is, we just wouldn't have recorded.
We'd be like, whatever.
Like, yeah, sure, it's fine. Or if you didn't want to be on the show, we're like, who's this fucking dude asking me to be on a podcast? Like, I don't care. You could have been like, yeah, dude, I don't know, I'm busy, whatever. If they want to, they will.
Yeah.
And I've experienced that in creative endeavors. Like, there's been friends who are like, I'd love to work on this thing with you. Heck yeah, I have this cool idea. And I'm like, dude, that sounds so dope. I would love to do it. And when it comes time to do the work, they don't.
Yeah.
And even though every time you might see them, they might say, dude, that'd be so fun if we did it. I ultimately know.
You're like, yep. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, sure, it would be cool. If you're waiting on me to do all the work to get you there, I'm not going to do that.
I'm getting to the point where I'm trying to not say stuff, because I used to be such a campaigner, probably from my salesperson days, that I love convincing people of the value of why they should do everything. But it's just like, that doesn't last, because they have to see the value on their own at some point.
Yeah. And
it only depletes my own take of my value, because I start to realize, like, why am I always convincing them that I'm worth it? Yep. I'm trying to now I need to convince myself, because I'm starting to it's like all a mess. That's what I learned.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree. Like, I have been through those exact same processes where I'm like, wait, I'm like projecting my wants and needs onto this other person, and I'm not really like, do they even know what they want or need? Even
if it's a creative thing, like you might actually see like why they should be a part of it and how it will benefit them.
Oh yeah.
But it's just one of those things where it's like, it's exhausting, and it's okay to let people see things for themselves. It's okay to let people bump their head. It's okay if we're wrong, but it's also okay if we let other people be wrong. I've had people come back, whether it's for a creative thing or whether it's for a relationship, and all different, whether it's for a job, and be like, oh my gosh, look, like you try back in the day, I just didn't see it. And I'm just like, okay, now it's my choice of whether I want to give them a chance because everyone's human. But at the same time, I have to remember my worth and be like, yeah, show me that you're ready this time, that you're serious. And that's just been something I'm learning.
100%. And that I
also have realized that this is new. I don't have to let everybody back. It's okay for me to allow life to happen and let them have consequences, because consequences are our best teacher. And sometimes me trying to deprive people of that only puts me back in stupid situations. And I'm thinking that I'm being merciful, but actually I'm just being stupid.
I have absolutely done the exact same thing.
So I'm like, oh, I wasn't supposed to do that. That's not mercy. That's foolishness.
1,000,000% yes.
So yeah.
Gabrielle, I have one final question for you.
More? Okay.
One final one, and then we will wrap this podcast up. So at the end of every one of these episodes, I ask the exact same question. So now it's your turn. So right now, I want you to pretend like everyone in the world is listening to you speak. So you got a live mic. You got a live mic attached to everyone everywhere. We're throwing logic out the window. They can hear you. They can understand you. So you get to share something with everybody right now.
My mind is blank now. Why'd you do that? It's like when you ask someone to sing a song.
You get to share something with everybody. What is it you're telling them, and what do you want them to hear?
Okay, I'm going to be honest with myself, like you said. Honestly, I would just say Jesus loves you, and that there's worth inside of you worth digging for, just for the sake of discovering it yourself.
I love it. Gabrielle, we just made a podcast. After all this time, we have finally
you're right.
made
oh my gosh.
happen. I don't know how long it was.
It did feel surreal. It does, like, I felt like we're actually here. I was like, oh, right? Wow, wait, I'm literally here. This is you in person.
Yes, it's like, okay, we're actually having this conversation now. We are. I cannot thank you enough.
Thank you for keep trying. You kept doing it. You had the courage of consistency.
You know what? I try to be a pretty consistent person.
Thank you.
I'm glad that it paid off, because now you are sitting here with me and just shared an incredible story that I cannot thank you enough for being your vulnerable, authentic self and sharing everything that you did. This was thank you
so much.
This was a blast of a conversation, and it's just fun to hear, I don't know, a story in that way, and just to hear like all that you've experienced and how it shaped you and all this sort of stuff. And again, like, as technically an outsider to your life, I see you as somebody who is incredibly talented. And just like I said earlier, like, the talent is one thing, but also the human being is another thing. And just sitting here with you in this conversation, again, I said it earlier, like, I feel like you have such a cool energy about you.
You're very cool too.
And I cannot thank you enough for sharing that with me. If anybody wants to seek out that energy of yours, or seek out any of these talents that you have, now's the time as we say goodbye for the plugs and promotions.
Oh, here we go.
We talked about all the real deep life things. Now it's time to tell people where to check you out on the internet. If you want them to, where can they find you?
Of course. I am actually Phoenix on Spotify and all platforms. And it is spelled very interestingly.
Yes, it is.
It's spelled 7HO3NIX. And there is a reason that I will tell people soon. It's like my story is written in the name. And so that's how you find me. Go check out my new song, Touch Me With Your Words. I love it. I'm so happy about it. I have a new song coming out. And you can go to GabrielleSolange.com or follow me on Instagram at Gabrielle.Solange, or TikTok. I do free vocal coaching videos. Gabrielle Solange is there also. And pretty much just search Phoenix or Gabrielle Solange and you'll find stuff.
Gabrielle, this is a blast.
Yeah, thank you.
I cannot thank you enough. I cannot thank you enough for being on the show. We did it. We made a podcast.
I don't know how you do this a lot. It's like a lot, man. Like, you just keep going. I'm just on episode 2.
I love doing it.
And you have like
also,
multiple podcasts.
Yes. I can, once we stop hitting record here, I can tell you some tricks of the trade if you would like, as to how to balance those things.
I don't.
So it was an absolute pleasure getting to know Gabby the way that I got to here. And listen, I always say the same thing at the end of every one of these episodes, but I have to say it, right? I really do appreciate when anybody shares anything they do on this podcast. And so, of course, I appreciate Gabby for sharing everything as openly and as honestly as she did here with her story as well. So if you do want to find her music and simply keep up with all that she is up to, you can follow her at Gabrielle.Solange. That will, of course, be directly linked down in the show notes. And speaking of links, be sure to go and double check to make sure that you're following this show at WYDH Pod on all socials. I also ask you to double check that you're subscribed on whatever platform that you check this out on. Whether it's Apple, Spotify, whatever it is, I really do appreciate the support. Hitting that little button really does help a ton. Also, take a quick moment and toss a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to this at as well. It all adds up, folks. It truly, truly helps more than what you may think. And of course, if you want to find these episodes in video form as well, those are over on my personal YouTube. That's youtube.com/Ross Tyson. Tyson is spelled Theisen. So do all the things, feed the algorithms, tell somebody about it, whatever you can do to help spread the word of this show and get these stories heard in whatever form. It helps out a lot more than you may think. But that is a wrap for this episode. I must bid you adieu. It's time to say good night and goodbye. So thanks for listening. If you watched on YouTube, thanks for looking. And I will catch you in the next one where I sit down with my next guest, whom you may or may not know of, as they share their story that you've probably for sure never heard.